only supports your cause further, your grace. For all their best fighting men will have died on the battlefield, and give you an easier time in taking your birthright. Your grace, I say the time has come. It is time to act. To restore you, the true heir, to the Iron Throne and end the Targaryen tyranny. Vargid turned to Maegor Blackfyr. The son of Maelys the Monstrous smirked at the news, and at Valerie's speech. He greedily finished his wine cup and ate a further 2 snacks. Then, when do we begin? He asked. Valerie's chuckled with a nod. Why, very soon, your grace. For as soon as our army returns from helping our Volanten allies in clearing Dothraki from their new lands, then we shall begin. What with? Asked Vargid. Valerie stood up and sipped from his cup before he walked to his map of Essos near the fireplace. He hovered his forefinger over the region of the Free Cities, before he pointed at the center of the Free Cities. At Pentos. Because of the Bravosis in the north, forcing unreasonable and extortionate demands upon the Pentoshes, they are looking for another to protect them. Which of course, we shall do. But in exchange for a strong alliance with the Triarchy. And in doing so, will come to our aid when we call upon them. And not even mighty Bravos can stop that. Notes. Rhaegar is glad to see the last of his father, but is angry at the concessions given to Stark, and doesn't want to admit that he fears him. All whilst Valerie's plans for the future advance upon hearing the news of the Seven Kingdoms and the recent war. Chapter 81, The Promise of an Alliance. Summary. Littlefinger has left Riverrun. Hoster and Brynden plan a trading alliance, and the Targaryens honor a promise with the Lannisters. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Brynden 8. Brynden smiled at Edmure as he sparred with Sir Robin. He nodded with approval when Sir Robin sliced his sword on Edmure's shield before thrusting at Edmure's breastplate. Brynden knew exactly what Edmure was doing, for he quickly bashed Sir Robin's sword from his hand with his shield and pointed his own at Sir Robin's neck. Brynden clapped at Edmure's performance. Fine fighting, Edmure. Well done, lad, said Brynden. Edmure nodded at the praise before putting his sword and shield to one side. Brynden patted him on the shoulder. Do you understand now why I put you through the training that I put you through? Brynden asked. They sat down together whilst Edmure looked down at the ground, thinking of an answer. To make me a better fighter. No. Not merely that. Any man can be a better fighter than a knight by practice and by learning as you survive for the next battle. No. What I did was harden you for the real world. Edmure, do you know how many battles I have fought? Edmure shook his head. No doubt having heard many different answers. I have fought in 60 battles now. 4 of which were only this year. Much of what I know now and have taught you, is what I learned from fighting on the battlefield, not on the training yard. I have killed many men. Of perhaps all kingdoms of Westeros and beyond. Against bandits, raiders, broken men, iron-born reavers, pirates, sellswords, Blackfyr warriors, knights and common soldiers of the Seven Kingdoms. What I am trying to say is that any boy and any man can be a knight. But first, that knight has to be a warrior. If I had it my way, I would say that all whom would be a knight would have to show they were deserving of it rather than simply having noble blood. For a knight proves himself in skill and deed, not in blood and standing. You know the skill now. And once you are old enough, you will add many great deeds to your name. All to make yourself a great Tully of Riverrun. Edmure nodded as Brynden patted his back. You are a fast learner, Edmure. You have the conviction and the spirit to do what is right. In a few years' time, when you are old enough, you will indeed become a knight and one ready to fight in battle should it come to it, he said. Sir Brynden. Brynden turned to Maester Vimen. Lord Tully summons you to his solar. Sir Brynden nodded before turning back to Edmure. Now you take all of that off and go and get some food and rest. You have earned it, Brynden said with a smile. Edmure walked to the armor and was being helped out of his training leathers and chainmail by a servant before Brynden followed Maester Vimen to Hoster's solar. Brynden opened the door and saw Hoster sat down. He was perusing various letters, sent by bannermen and lords paramount. Brynden could see from the numerous broken seals on each one. From the likes of Titus Blackwood and Jason Mallister, to Robert Baratheon, Jon Arryn and Eddard Stark. "You sent for me, brother?" asked Brynden. Hoster nodded before Brynden sat down. "First of all, has my former ward left for good?" Hoster asked. Brynden nodded, though he was angry. For he wanted nothing more than to castrate the boy in question and send him to the wall. "I have assurances from my friend and comrade, Sir Kyle Royce, the newly appointed Knight of the Bloody Gate, that he has arrived at the Vale and is being escorted, by armed guard, to the Fingers. He won't leave the Fingers without Kyle knowing of it. And should he try anything in the Riverlands, he will be suitably punished." Hoster nodded with a smirk. "I was too kind to the boy over the years. I thought only of his father, whom was all that his son is not." Brynden nodded as he remembered Baltasar Baelish in the War of the Ninepenny Kings, and whom had died only 2 years ago. "Now, further matters," said Hoster before he faced Brynden and pressed his fingers together. "I briefly met Eddard Stark in King's Landing and he said that in exchange for the help we provided, he said for either myself or for you to come to Winterfell personally to negotiate on a trading agreement in which the North can provide for the Riverlands, which he voiced in particular, a discounted use of the Kalin Canal." Brynden nodded at that. "A very fair deal. Very fair indeed. Which will be of great use when trading ships in the service of Houses Mallister, Cox and Mouton sail across the Seven Kingdoms or sail to the Free Cities." "Did you not negotiate there in King's Landing?" asked Brynden. Hoster shook his head as well as waved his hand. "No, I couldn't risk the Targaryens or their lickspittles from learning of our help to him and the North. Not at least this early in Rhaegar's reign. No. Which is why we left it at that." "Would you have me go to Winterfell, brother?" asked Brynden. "I would," Hoster replied with a nod. "What agreements would you want in particular to make with them?" asked Brynden. "As well as the discount for the Kalin Canal, I would want to build in the Riverlands what they have built in the North. Ricard long told me of the Valyrian roads, Bravo Sea aqueducts and Yetish dams. From what I understand, they have built them in the North. I would build them in the Riverlands also." "In exchange for what?" "This is a lot to ask of the North, even after all that we did to help them, brother," said Brynden. "I know. And that is why we shall offer gold also." "1,000,000 gold dragons," Hoster replied. Brynden pursed his lips. "Ricard truly impressed you with his talk of his great projects, didn't he? Well, take a look at these sketches in question. And tell me what they suggest to you." Hoster passed 3 sketches to him. 2 of which had writing in Valyrian Glyphs. The third had an unfamiliar writing on it, Yetish calligraphy, Brynden assumed. "Impressive," Brynden said as he looked at the sketches. "Exactly. Just think how much water could be provided for the small folk of the Riverlands from the aqueducts. With villages no longer having to be situated so close to the Red Fork or the Trident. The dams would do a great deal in preventing devastating floods from wiping out entire villages. And the roads, brother. The Valyrian roads would increase the speed of travel and therefore an easier time to travel from place to place." Tijet X. Tijet grimaced and panted quietly as Maester Crelan removed the stitches. "There, my lord. It is all gone," he said with a smile. Not quite, Tijet knew very well. He looked down, sure of what he knew already. And as he suspected, he was right. He ran his fingers over the scar, stretched diagonally across his abdominal muscles. There was a considerable dip in his chest as he ran his fingers over his chest and then they dipped down into the scar. "Nothing cuts like Valyrian steel," Tijet commented as he picked up his shirt and put it back on. "My apologies, my lord. But such a wound is most difficult to heal absolutely." "For you have said so yourself," said Maester Crelan. "No apologies are necessary," Maester Tijet replied with a small smile. He grabbed his jerkin and placed it on. Tijet now left his solar, intending to go to the sparring yard. Hoping to take up his sword once again. For Maester Crelan had forbidden him from doing so whilst he was treating his wound. "Brother." Tijet turned around to see Geryon. "Come. Tywin summons us to his solar," he said. Tijet walked to join his younger brother. "Did Maester Crelan remove the stitches?" he asked. "He did, little brother." Though the scar it leaves behind is another matter, Tijet replied before he lifted up his shirt and showed the scar. Gods! What a scar! Pity it wasn't on your face. Could have improved it to charm the women. Something my face would have no trouble with, Geryon boasted. Tijet chuckled before flicking his finger at Geryon's ear. Cheeky little brother. I can see where Tyrion gets his sharp tongue from, Tijet said as they both chuckled. Tijet tucked his shirt back under his belt before they reached Tywine Solar. Just as Jenna and Kevan had arrived. How are you, brother? Asked Jenna. Tijet lifted his shirt up again. Maester Creelan removed the stitches. But Eddard Stark's sword still has left a deep scar, he replied. You should have known better than to fight a proven warrior wielding a Valyrian steel sword, brother, Kevan remarked with a raised brow. Kevan, Jenna said with an admonishing frown before slapping his shoulder. No, it's all right, sister. He speaks the truth. I was arrogant. I didn't think highly of how skillful he might be. I thought only of ending the war and testing my steel against a great warrior. Only to be cut down in just a moment. He would have finished me off had we not heard the bugles, Tijet explained. They entered Tywine Solar. Tywine looked up, holding a letter in his hand. As they sat down, Tijet glanced at the letter. He smiled when he saw that it was sent by the Targaryens. What news is there, brother? Asked Tijet. Tywine held up the letter. This is a letter from Queen Elia. She has agreed to formally release Jaime. Excellent. Just what we have wanted. Even if they had to genuflect to the demands of the young wolf. That is good news, isn't it, brother? I see you are not content, said Geryon. They all turned to Tywine, who burrowed his brows before he replied. As well as saying that they will release Jaime, she does mention that she wants us to provide a suitable replacement for him in the Kingsguard. Well, there are no shortage of highly skilled knights in the Westerlands, brother, said Geryon. Though that very list is shorter, brother, on account of many of those knights slain, maimed or crippled at Spring Falls. Including Amory and Laurent Lorque as well as Gregor Clegane, Kevan pointed out. Not that any of those three shall be dearly missed. Then, who shall replace him, Tywine? Asked Jenna. It was then that a thought came to Tijet's mind. I know just the man, Tijet announced with a smile. They all turned to him. Roland Crickehall's second son, Salile the Strongbow. Tywine nodded at that. Jaime's friend. Yes. A second son would make a fine addition to the Kingsguard. And he is a proven and capable knight, Tywine commented. Very skilled. I have sparred with him on numerous occasions, and he slew several northerners at Spring Falls, Tijet added. Tywine hummed before he picked a parchment. Very well. I will send for the Strongbow from Crickehall. In the meantime, Kevan, you will go prepare to travel to the capital and collect Jaime. As well as deliver Salile to them. He will meet with you at the Golden Tooth and then you will travel together. Yes, brother, said Kevan. And Jaime shall take his rightful place as heir to Casterly Rock. Notes. Littlefinger has left Riverrun for good, and with no friends to call his own there. Hoster and Brynden plan to make good their plans for a trading alliance with the North and to make full use of what improvements they could build in the Riverlands. And the Lannisters prepare to offer a replacement for Jaime on the Kingsguard. Chapter 82, The Werewolf and the Dragon. Summary. Ned meets Aes for the first time, personally. Bad news for Aes. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Eddard 17. Eddard watched as he was brought by Wheelhouse to the Great Keep. Throughout the trip through the Winter City and to Winterfell, the small folk booed the former king and thrown food, rocks and even piles of horse shit at his wheelhouse. And when the wheelhouse came to a stop in the courtyard, he was dragged from there by a small group of guardsmen and thrown into a cell. I would have words with him. Just this once. I did not face him at all on the voyage from King's Landing. But now I will. I will when I show him why he never had a chance against the Starks of Winterfell. Eddard held Ash's hand as they glared down at him from the balcony. He snarled, cursed and sneered at the guardsmen. Touch me at your peril, mere weaklings and mortals. You will all burn. I am the dragon. And I will burn you all, he screamed for all to hear. Eddard gripped the balustrade of the balcony in anger. As he heard the creaking of the stone balustrade, he felt the warm presence of Ash's hands on his. He turned and she smiled sadly at him. "It's all right, Ned. It will be over soon," she said. I know, Ash," he replied before kissing her sweet-tasting lips. They made their way to the Winterfell dungeons. The guardsman bowed and made way for them as they reached Aerys' cell. "Open it. And leave us for 5 minutes," Eddard commanded. "Milord," he replied before unlocking the cell door and passing him the keys. The Gauler took his leave and walked back to his office. Eddard entered the cell, closely followed by Ash. She glared darkly at the evil bastard that murdered father and Brandon. But, he was no coward. This, Eddard could see. "What are you waiting for, Wolf? Come and kill the dragon. Though try, and you shall burn. A fate that all whom cross the dragon suffer. As did your father and brother, though they did beg for mercy at first, like the cowards that they were," he said. An evil smile curled on his cracked and split lips. Eddard shook his head before chuckling. He took a step towards Aerys. "Oh, I am no wolf, Aerys Targaryen." Suddenly, he paused. He remembered whom else was there. He turned to Ash. He was fearful of her being hurt. Or being frightened by what he would turn into. She had already seen him in his first form. But she was yet to see him in his second. A form in which he had already embraced twice, during the war. Ash smiled at him and nodded. Eddard turned back to face Aerys. Eddard twitched slightly before he felt himself turn into his first form, right in front of his eyes. He saw him gasp and shake as he gazed at Eddard. He spluttered and couldn't speak as he stared at what he had become. Eddard was already a foot taller. His arms and legs were thicker than trunks of a heart tree. And he felt strong enough to lift an entire ship with just one hand. But he was far from finished. Eddard growled viciously as he glared down at Aerys. Aerys retreated to a corner of his cell. Eddard heard his own bones crack and expand until he was stood 12 feet tall, with arms and legs as thick as pillars of the Red Keep. And with claws reaching out a foot long. And fangs as long and sharp as razors. Eddard turned back to Ash. She still remained stood there. She looked up at him with fearful, but loving eyes. Which served to make Eddard calm. Before he turned back around, reminding himself of whom was there. He advanced on to Aerys. "You started this, Aerys Targaryen, when you murdered my brother and father," Eddard growled, his voice sounding more like a wolf's guttural roar than a man's speech. "And no. No. This cannot be. I am the dragon. I am the dragon. No wolf can kill me," he screamed to the roof, as though his 7 gods would turn him into a dragon. "You played a stupid game, Aerys Targaryen. You are no dragon. I am no wolf. And yet now, you find yourself facing a werewolf," Eddard growled before lifting Aerys up with one hand. Aerys gasped and shuddered as he was lifted up. He tried scratching and punching at Eddard's arm. But he grunted and groaned in pain every time that he hit Eddard's outstretched arm, holding him by his waist. "Tomorrow, I will behead you in front of all of Winterfell, where little children will point at you and laugh at you whilst men and women will spit and curse at you. Your beheading will forever be a warning to all those whom would dare to make an enemy of the Starks of Winterfell," Eddard roared. Aerys screamed and wept as Eddard dropped him and let him fall on the ground. "I am the dragon. I am the dragon," he screamed as he crawled back to his corner. Eddard turned back to Ash. Seeing her calmed him. He inhaled as she reached out and held his hand. Eddard trembled as he began to feel himself twitch and his bones crack again. He panted as he looked at his hands once again. He was in human form once more. "Ash. It's all right. It's all right," she whispered gently before kissing him. Eddard turned back around to Aerys, whom wept, shook and trembled as he laid eyes on Eddard. Notes. Now Aerys has gone mad with denial and confusion. Which I thought fun to write, rather than die thinking that he was a dragon. Chapter 83, The Starks and the Tullys. Summary. Ned, Ashura and Brynden meet in Winterfell to discuss the possibility of an alliance. Meanwhile Rhaegar and Elia have their first small council session as king and queen, and with their new small council. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Ashura 13. Is there news? Ashura asked Ned as they sat together in his solar. "Aye. From Lyanna. She and Robert are traveling today for Riverrun. Upon their arrival, ours, and Elbert's, Lyanna will wed Robert and Lysa Tully will wed Elbert," said Ned. "Two great weddings. But, Ned, you know that in the small council, they may become paranoid about this," said Ashura. "Would Roriga be so foolish as to think this?" asked Ned. "Roriga, perhaps not. But his small council is another matter. He might have Elia and Rolla by his side, but even that won't be enough. Not when there are ambitious players of the Game of Thrones whom would seek to take advantage of the chaos that follows in the wake of Aerys' death and Roriga's ascension. Men whom would be jealous and envious of the North's power. Especially now, after all the concessions granted to the North. They may want to try and turn Roriga against us, if he is not already against us," said Ashura. "But surely Roriga would not want an enemy of us. Not after the war. And his father's death, after all that he did to him and to his mother," asked Ned. "You would think that. But, Ned, the fact of the matter is that Roriga will fear you. He fears the power you have. He fears how you are feared and respected across the realm, if not beyond. He knows that all you have to do is muster all armies of the North and gather our allies, and no army of the Targaryens would be able to withstand you." Ned frowned at her speech. "I hate this, Ash. This Game of Thrones. I have no wish for it to take place in the North. Or to ever play it," he said. Ashura held his hands. "I know, Ned. I know that. And you will always have me by your side. This I promise," she said gently before kissing him. A knock on the door alerted them to the door. "I," asked Ned. "My lord. Sir Brynden of House Tully is here to speak with you." "Send him in," said Ned. Both he and Ashura sat down at his desk as the door opened. The renowned Blackfish stepped into the solar. Seeing him reminded Ashura of the old and battle-hardened knights she had met in King's Landing. Knights such as Barristan Selmy, Luwin Martell and Drold Hightower. Though she had little doubt that if the Blackfish was a Kingsguard knight, he would never ever allow for Rolla to suffer from Aerys' hands. "Ned. Lady Ashura," he said, with a warm smile. "Sir Brynden." "Do sit down," said Ned as the two shook hands and he kissed Ashura's hand. The Blackfish of Riverrun sat down and crossed his arms before he spoke. "I came upon a great many small folk on my journey to Winterfell. All of whom spoke of justice and how the once mighty dragon was brought low and beheaded by the avenging wolf. If only those small folk knew the truth of it. Of how Ned terrified him to that low. Before he cut off his head. Aye, a fate he deserved and more," Ned said simply. Ashura could hear the pain in Ned's voice. She smiled and held his hand. "My poor Ned. Now, how might we be of help to House Tully, Sir Brynden?" asked Ned. "When in King's Landing, my brother said how you were ready to offer a trading agreement with House Tully." "That is true," I said that, Ned replied with a nod. "And as I said to him, I am prepared to offer a sizable discount for use of the Kalin Canal. A quarter less for House Tully to pay," Ned offered. "A fine offer," he said before Ashura decided to add to it. "But there is more that can be offered between our two countries, Sir Brynden, of course. House Stark would be prepared to grant House Tully and the Riverlands the plans, diagrams and means to build the dams, aqueducts and Valyrian roads which dot the landscape of the North, as you will have seen on your journey." Sir Brynden nodded with a smile at that. "Indeed, I saw plenty of such things on my journey, my lady. Incredible work, it is. And to see such things in the Riverlands would mean a great deal to my brother, his bannermen and to all future generations of Riverlanders. The least that House Stark can do to repay all that House Tully had done for us in our most dire hour of need," said Ned. "As well as a stipend of the production of northern mined and produced resources," Ned offered. "All which make a great and valued offer to House Tully, Ned. For which House Tully is more than ready to offer 1,000,000 gold dragons," said the Blackfish of Riverrun. Ned and Ashura shared a glance. Ashura nodded at him. "We accept, Sir Brynden," said Ned before they shook hands. Lucerys ate. Lucerys was glad that Rolla had persuaded their new king for him to retain his seat in the small council. The Lickspittles of Aerys had long since left the capital to return to their respective homes. Of Aerys' small council, only he, Varys, Pycelle and Sidrold remained and retained their positions. Miles Mouton was the master of coin. Richard Lunmouth was Master of Laws. And John Connington was Hand of the King. Though Lucerys knew them to be childhood friends of Roriger, he did not consider them to be lickspittles. Though he did recognize their lack of experience in the Game of Thrones and in matters of stewardship and the positions for which they were chosen. He had no doubt that they would soon gain an understanding for their own duties. But with Roriger as the newly crowned king, he would need them to be at their best. And in the Kingsguard, were two changes. Sir Jaime was released from the Kingsguard, with the Grand Maester stating that he could not be in the Kingsguard, for he was Aes hostage and therefore an unwilling knight. And at the Battle of Autumnstead, Sir Jonnet Hore was slain by Willam Dustin, Lord of Barrowton. Both Kingsguard knights were replaced by newly arrived knights in the capital. Sir Jaime was replaced by a replacement whom was provided by Tywin Lannister, Sir Lylcrake Hall, the Strong Boar. And Sir Jonnet Hore was replaced by Sir Geoffrey Mallister, the Red Eagle. Both were highly skilled knights, as was proven by them in a series of tests Sir Gerald held for his new sworn brothers. And sat in the small council, Lucerys saw little change when Sir Gerald was the first to arrive. Lord Commander. Good day. And to you, Lord Valerian, he said with a bow of his head. And how are your new sworn brothers faring in the Kingsguard, he asked. They are faring well. Both are skilled and honourable knights. Though Sir Lyle is impatient for glory, he commented. He has years ahead of him before he will achieve any glory on the battlefield, Lucerys thought before the rest of the small council. Lucerys was glad to see both Rolla and Elia were also in attendance, and had come with the king. Both are wise women. They will provide good counsel, I am sure. My lords. Let us sit, said the king. Lucerys sat down and looked to him. What news is there that I should be made aware of? Lord Varys, he asked. Varys hummed before drawing a parchment from his pocket. My king. A great celebration is taking place in Riverrun. Houses Stark, Arryn and Baratheon, as well as numerous bannermen of the latter two are coming for the wedding of Elbereth Arryn and Lysa Tully, as well as Lyanna Stark and Robert Baratheon. The king frowned at that. Eddard Stark goes to Riverrun, he asked. Indeed, my king. As well as that, I have heard it that he has indeed personally executed the former king. Rolla, Roriger and Elia all breathed a sigh of relief at the news. But my bird whom brought this to me, also sung another song. And that is, asked Elia. My queen, Sir Brynden the Blackfish was also in Winterfell. For what, I did not know until I cross-referenced it with another song from a bird in Riverrun. The Tullys have made an extensive trading agreement with House Stark, he explained. Do you know the details of this agreement? Asked Rolla. I do not, Your Grace, he replied. Your Grace, is this news truly worthy of your attention? Asked Lucerys, hoping that he wouldn't become as paranoid about House Stark as his late father had been. That depends, Lord Valerian. For House Stark was once our enemy. And currently, any house that aligns with them, even for a trading agreement, is liable to scrutiny and investigation, said John Connington. Perhaps, a more tempered action might be called for than direct scrutiny, suggested the Queen. What were you suggesting? Roriger asked his queen. I think that we should have Varys birds watch Riverrun. See if it's just a few weddings and whether anything noteworthy happens or not. If not, then we need never be concerned. But if there truly is anything of concern, then we have investigations take place. But we cannot have it seem that these houses are being monitored by us, not when the realm heals devastating wounds dealt by this war. Roriger, Lucerys was glad to see, nodded at her words. Lucerys smiled at that. I cannot believe that anyone was so dismissive of our queen only on account of her heritage as a Martell and a Dornish woman. House Targaryen was blessed on the day our king wed Elia Martell. Notes. The Starks and Tullys are now allies. And now Lucerys is impressed with Elia's conduct as queen. More so than his opinion of Roriger, as crown prince and as king both. Chapter 84, Two Weddings. Summary. Two weddings take place in Riverrun. Though different weddings than originally planned. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Elbereth 11. Dressed in the finest doublet and trousers, decorated with the colours House Arryn, Elbereth inhaled and exhaled gently as he stepped on the grounds of Riverrun's September. He looked up to see the guests all walking inside. Many were visiting principal bannermen of the Vale. He smiled when he recognized the faces of Yone, Kyle, Horton Redfort, Anya Wainwood, John Linderley, Gerald Grafton and Eon Hunter. He did not dare look at Lionel Corbray in the face, for he had personally killed his brother, Lynn, at Autumnstead. And Gerald Grafton's father, Mark, had been killed by the Blackfish that day also. And then he saw his friends from his childhood in attendance. Robert, Ned, as well as cousin Denise, his wife and their son. And then there were his various comrades from the war. Sir Bryndon, Joffrey, his former squire, William Dustin, Mark Roswell, and Howland Reed. Though unfortunately, Geoffrey could not be there, for he was now a knight of Rhaegar's Kingsguard, and had taken the nickname, the Red Eagle. Since fighting alongside them in the war, Elbereth felt a deep kinship with these men. He never would have felt it had he not fought. But fight he did. And he learned the true value of the kinship between brothers in arms. Between men who fought together on the battlefield. It was a bond of blood and friendship that Elbereth would not soon forget. For he felt he would trust these men over men he barely knew and yet happened to be Arryns of the Eyrie. Even over the friends he had made over the years. Those whom he jousted with and sparred with at tourneys and in practice yards. My true friends are not those I merely grew up with. They are those whom I shared a tent with in times of war. Whom I marched with from battle to battle. Those whom I fought alongside with at the crossroads, at Autumnstead, Juniper Hall and at Spring Falls. Elbereth felt strongly about this. For after seeing the face of war, he saw the price paid by men for their country. He had seen many a brave northerner fight to avenge the honor of the North and House Stark and to defend their country from the aggression of Aerys Targaryen. Elbereth awoke from his thoughts. He turned to Uncle John, who was smiling encouragingly at him. "It's time. Your time to wed," he said. "Yes, Uncle," he said, inhaling one last time. He exhaled before he walked with him inside the September. Elbereth walked alongside Uncle John inside the September. Like the castle of Riverrun itself and the town in the outer part, it was small. But what it lacked in bulk and size, it made up for in decoration. Decoration which included the banners of Proud House Tully and Great House Arryn. Elbereth took his place before the altar of the seven. Septon Trenton stood before the altar, smiling at him kindly. Elbereth made curious glance around the gathered audience. He smiled when he saw Uncle John stood with Denise, Robert, Ned, Yone and Kyle at his side of the aisle. On the other side, at the head was Sir Bryndon, the fair and beautiful Caitlin Tully, the young heir to Riverrun, Edmure and various cousins of theirs in House Went. There was no sign of Lysa. Until the doors opened. Stood in the doorway was Lysa. Dressed in a beautiful dress. It was a silver white and gold brocade and images of Tully trouts in blue woven into the incredible dress. And hers was a beautiful shawl of Tully blue and red. Holding her hand and escorting her down the aisle was the proud Lord Hoster. Dressed in a rich outfit of blue and red and decorated with a pin of the jumping trout of House Tully. Were Brandon alive, this would be the best moment of his life. To see his daughters wed to two future lords paramount. I cannot fault a man's ambitions. Though he did have the sense to help us in the war. And helped get Lyanna to safety. Lysa smiled giggly as her father gently patted her shoulder before kissing her gently on the cheek before taking his place at the front of the Tully aisle. Elbereth beamed at her as he walked to his side. She blushed adorably as she held his hand and they faced Septon Trenton. "You may now cloak the bride under your protection." Elbereth reached up for Lysa's Tully embroidered cloak and unfastened it. She blushed so much, it reminded Elbereth of when Ned was pining over Usher Dane. "She is so pretty and adorable," Elbereth thought as he unclasped the cloak. He passed the cloak to her sister, stood nearby, whom was beaming proudly for Lysa. Elbereth unclasped his own cloak from his shoulders. He decided to tease Lysa by leaning close to her as he clasped the cloak around her shoulders. She blushed redder than the red on House Tully's banner, Elbereth thought with a grin. Septon Trenton tied a ribbon around their holding hands. "Let it be known that Elbereth Arryn and Lysa Tully are one heart, one flesh, one soul. Cursed be who would seek to tear them asunder." Elbereth and Lysa shared a smile as he unraveled the ribbon. He placed the ribbon aside, passing it to one of his acolytes as they turned to face Septon Trenton. He held his arms out for all to see as he faced the two sides of the aisle. In the sight of the seven, I hereby seal these two souls, binding them as one for eternity, he said before facing the bride and groom. Now look upon each other and say the words. They faced each other to say the words. Father, smith, warrior, mother, maiden, crone, stranger, said the bride and the groom. I am his and he is mine. From this day until the end of my days. I am hers and she is mine. From this day until the end of my days, Elbert said clearly and confidently. Now, brimming with confidence, Elbert turned to face all of those gathered. With this kiss, I pledge my love. At that, he turned to face Lysa. He gently leant in and softly kissed her lips. Interlude 8. Harbert Baratheon, James Purefoy. House Baratheon's future is secure. Harbert nodded with approval when he saw Robert take his place before the altar of the seven. He turned and glanced at Stannis and at Renly. Harbert smiled and winked at him. Robert nodded back before he turned to face the altar of the seven. Harbert loved his family. Mother, Corinna Swan, had taught he and his brother Ormond to value and put family above all else. Lessons which carried with Harbert ever since. Which was why he did not hesitate to protect both Ormond and his young nephew Stefan when the former was cut down by Maelys the Monstrous himself at the Stepstones. Many had thought that he might try and seize power for himself. But Harbert shouted and beat any man that dared accuse of him of kinslaying and usurpation. And that was why he so keenly raised both Stannis and Renly in Robert's absence in the Eyrie. And after Stefan and Cassina had died trying to find a pure Valyrian bride for Rhaegar. A fact which made Harbert loathe the Targaryens just as much as Robert had done so. For it was Jaehaerys' weakness and inadequacy that led to him to give command of the war to Ormond, so eager to do his duty, especially after being wed to a Targaryen princess and making amends for father defending the honor of House Baratheon after Duncan the Small cared not for his own honor and the honor of his house and rutted with a common and low-born whore. What happens now, uncle? Renly whispered. Harbert turned to Renly and leant down. Just wait and see, my lad. Lyanna will come soon, escorted by her brother. And then the wedding truly begins, Harbert whispered in reply. Harbert liked the Lady Lyanna. She was hardy and unafraid. She was unhesitant in standing up for her savior, Davos the smuggler. A criminal whom was of good character, Harbert could see. And did not even try and sell her off to Aes the Mad. For which, Harbert was grateful. He knew how much Robert adored her. Which was why he supported Robert when he granted him a pardon and awarded him and his family a keep on Cape Wrath called Gusthold. They had taken the name Seaworth. And swore fealty to House Baratheon of Storm's End. And selected the banner of an onion ship, saying that he would disguise himself as an onion merchant on his unlawful voyages. The doors opened. Look, Renly, Harbert whispered with a smile. He himself turned around. He smiled when he saw her. Lyanna Stark dressed in a beautiful dress decorated with white and grey, the colors of mighty House Stark, and with images of wolves on the embroidery. She held the hand of her elder brother. The fearsome Lord of Winterfell. Robert's beloved friend, Eddard the Young Wolf. Young Wolf indeed. I know a great warrior when I see one. And Robert's good brother is an incredible warrior, I see that now. Eddard and Lyanna Stark walked to the altar of the seven before he took his place with his lady wife and his younger brother Benjen. Lyanna smiled as she stood with Robert. Robert was blushing as he held hands with her. Harbert was grinning at seeing Robert blush so. Never seen the lad act like this before. She is clearly very special. I am glad that she means so much to him. Stefan found that when he met his beloved Cassina. And Ormond found that with Raoul. Septon Trenton began the ceremony. You may now cloak the bride under your protection. Robert unclasped her Stark cloak before passing it to her good sister, Ashera Stark, one of the most beautiful women Harbert had ever seen in his life. And Robert proceeded to clasp his own Baratheon cloak around her with pride. Let it be known that Robert Baratheon and Lyanna Stark are one heart, one flesh, one soul. Cursed be he who would seek to tear them asunder, he announced as he tied a ribbon around their holding hands. Robert's large and muscular hands were enormous in contrast to her own small and delicate hands. Harbert beamed with pride and nodded at Robert when he glanced in his direction. before the good Septon of Riverrun began to unravel the ribbon before he passed it to a nearby acolyte. In the sight of the seven, I hereby bless these two souls, binding them as one for eternity. Now, look upon one another and say the words. At first they had been facing him. Now they faced each other. Father, smith, warrior, mother, maiden, crone, stranger, they said together. I am his and he is mine, from this day until the end of my days. I am hers and she is mine, from this day until the end of my days, Robert said with flushing pride. Of that, I have no doubt. I have met many a boisterous Barathian. And never have I seen one whom would give up all vices a warrior loves for just the woman of his dreams. Robert turned to face all those gathered in the September. From friends and family of both he and Lionel, to Robert's comrades from the war and bannermen of the Stormlands. With this kiss, I pledge my love. Theirs is a loving kiss. More so than that shared between the Arryn boy and the Tully girl, Harbert thought. Good. I can only hope that they love each other as Stefan and Cassina adored each other, Harbert thought as he clapped with everyone else. Notes. Now Elbert and Lysa are married. And Robert and Lionel are married. Chapter 85, A Warm Welcome. Summary. After hosting 2 weddings in Riverrun, Hoster hopes to host another soon, as well as make another alliance with another kingdom. Whilst Valeries hopes to make another alliance himself. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Brynden 9. The festivities in Riverrun were incredible, Brynden felt. Hoster had spared no expense in them. Not merely to celebrate that his daughter was wed to the heir of a Lord Paramountcy, but to show all whom attended, that House Tully and the Riverlands was a member of an alliance of 4 kingdoms of West Eos. The Riverlands, the North, the Vale and the Stormlands. A conglomeration of allies. Whilst all were not joined in marriage, they were tested in the war. The war in which all had supported the North in its war for justice against the Iron Throne. Hoster had always said that he did not want to keep this alliance and wed his daughters to the heirs of Lords Paramountcy just to ensure his daughters married high. He had always maintained that it was to guarantee House Tully's protection against potential enemies. For the Riverlands was the central of the 7 kingdoms. And that almost all wars were fought there. That was certainly proven true in the Northern Rebellion. Until after Autumnstead and the killings of Jonnet Hordiari and Mark Grafton. And then the war moved into the Crown Lands. But now that the alliance was formally made, both in marriage and in war, Brynden felt that Hoster's dream was achieved. Until Hoster had decided to go forward with something they had discussed soon after his return home from the war. A week after the visiting bannermen of Riverrun, and the Lords of the North, the Vale and the Stormlands had left Riverrun, Hoster invited Brynden to his solar. "What would you have for us now, brother?" asked Brynden. "I am sending you to Casterly Rock. When you have arrived, you will meet with Tywin Lannister," he replied. "Does he know why I am coming?" asked Brynden, suspecting what this was about. "I imagine he will. For this is Tywin Lannister we are talking about." "Well, he certainly will not complain about the marriage offer," Brynden commented. "No, he would not. The unwed and chaste daughter of a Lord Paramount. Cat is the only one of such character in the realm currently. And now that Sir Jaime is his heir once again, he will need to wed and secure the future of Casterly Rock." Brynden nodded at what Hoster was saying. "Does Cat know what you intend for her?" Hoster shook his head. "Not yet, and I would prefer to keep this from her. Until Tywin has agreed to it. And when he does, then I will be the one to tell her," Hoster replied. "Well, Tywin will certainly be eager to wed with House Tully and benefit from the alliance we have made," Brynden commented. "Indeed. Now that the Northerners are building the Riverlands anew, we stand as an example for all the realm to bear witness to. It won't be long before the Vale and the Stormlands receive these benefits also. Tywin Lannister will be furious, though, I am sure, that Lannister Gold could not build these improvements first as opposed to the Starks building it all first." "When will I leave for the Westerlands then?" asked Brynden as he drank from a wine cup Hoster had poured for him. "As soon as you can. And upon your return, I will tell Cat and then we shall plan for her wedding to Sir Jaime. And Ed Muir." Hoster frowned at the mention of this. "Brynden, I can assure you that I have not forgotten my son's future or his prospects in matrimony. The problem is that there are almost no prospects for him across the realm unless one counts the daughter of Doran Martell, though she is heiress to Sunspear, or the granddaughter of Quayan Greyjoy. Perhaps a Tyrell. Mace Tyrell has a few sisters and cousins, the last I heard. Brynden suggested. Hoster shook his head at that. All would be older than he. And the Tyrells are forever restless and greedy. They would try and demand more for their family to spread across the realm and continue to grow strong. They may even want some of their useless Tyrells sitting around Highgarden to be awarded lordships of the castles we are restoring. On that, we can agree. Especially if the tales they tell of Mace Tyrell are true. Ceaselessly tried to have a daughter with his wife, the fair Aeleri Hightower. Only to have 3 sons. Also that his daughter can wed Prince Aegon and be queen. Well, one thing is for certain. House Tyrell will not be joining our little alliance anytime soon. They have no way of marrying directly to the future of Houses Stark, Baratheon, Arryn or Tully currently. Not unless Mace Tyrell wants a niece of his to wed Ed Muir. If he has any of good quality and character. Though it did feel strange as he left to prepare his belongings. When not only a few moons ago, the Lannisters were his enemy and serving House Targaryen. And he had slain numerous soldiers and knights of the Westerlands. Including Sir Amory Lorque when he was amongst the first wave of knights sent to fight under the command of Tyrett Lannister. Not that Brynden would complain of that. The man was a cruel prick who didn't deserve to be a knight. For he was rumoured to have thrown down the last Lord Tarbeck, a boy of 3, down a well during the Rain Tarbeck revolt. Vargid 11. This is very important to Valerys, Vargid decided when their entourage entered the city. Vargid looked around the city's streets as small folk greeted their arrival with enthusiastic applause and cheers. Vargid never cared for applause such as this. For he mistrusted it. He mistrusted it when it was all lies. It was all a weapon and a tool of persuasion for visiting nobles, magisters and rulers of foreign nations and free cities, he knew. These small folk didn't care for the Triarchy or what it could offer their city. Vargid was far from relaxed as he rode alongside Valerie's wheelhouse. I should be fighting. I despise having to be a glorified bodyguard or a mere lackey for Valerie's political schemes. If he wants me fighting for the Triarchy's benefit, I would gladly do that. And yet, here I am. In this city. Which stinks of cheese, Summer Isles oil, the sea and wine. Not exactly a good first impression of the city on my first visit. As Vargid glanced around, he looked back at the gates they had passed through. And at the great walls surrounding the city. He hummed at what he saw. Before he was facing their destination once again with a frown and a shake of his head. It is no wonder that the Bravosis have won wars against these arrogant fools. They cannot build towers and walls strong enough to withstand the armies of Bravos, nor protect their ports from their fleets. If it came to it, a Dothraki Khalasar could ride for Pentos and ransack it at the click of Ickle's fingers. Vargid's opinion of Pentos and of the Pentoshi peoples was far from favorable. Not when they were so subservient to Bravos after losing numerous wars to them. To the extent that under Bravos' stern conditions imposed on them, they were forbidden from ever owning slaves or possessing an army, a sellsword company to protect them or a war fleet. As Vargid looked at the prince's palace, he smirked. Had I not taken Valerie's coin, I could have led the second sons here. I could have taken the entirety of Pentos. And crowned myself prince. Defeat Bravos in war. And turn Pentos into a stronghold. A stronghold to throw the Dothraki carls from the city that would dare to purchase a man's there. They finally arrived at the courtyard of the prince's palace. It was magnificent, Vargid decided. As he climbed down from his horse, he saw the local slaves open the wheelhouse door for Valerie's. He climbed out, helped down by an unsullied. He was dressed formally in the regalia of the first Magister of Lies. Holding the magisterial scepter and wearing robes decorated with Valyrian glyphs and imagery, as well as the symbol of House Del Tala. But it was what he wore on his bald head which set him out amongst all other nobles of Lies and Pentos in the courtyard. The magisterial cap of Lies. You've never been to Pentos before, have you, Vargid? He asked. I have not, no, Vargid replied with a shake of his head. An acquired taste, I suppose. The city, he commented. Vargid turned to the palace doors, which swiftly opened. And out exited the prince, surrounded by magisters and unsullied. And its prince? Vargid asked. Valeries turned to the city's prince and watched him closely. We shall soon see for ourselves, he replied with a slight smirk. Before the smirk quickly turned into a friendly smile as he greeted Prince Tychidos Eneris. Your Excellency. Welcome to the free city of Pentos, he said with outstretched fat arms in his intricately decorated robes, decorated with Valyrian glyphs and imagery, just as Valeries wore. And yet he also wore a magnificent amulet with a ruby in the shape of a square brick tower, just like on the banners of Pentos. Your Grace, I would like to thank you for this wondrous welcome. It is a great honor to have been so warmly welcomed by your own people. As you can attest by looking at my wheelhouse, he said before gesturing to the roof of his wheelhouse, nearly entirely covered in the flower petals thrown by the small folk of Pentos. Saying that reminded Vargid, whom swiftly ran his fingers through his hair and was glad to see the flower petals fall far down. Vargid, Valeries and Prince Tychidos walked from the courtyard and to the dining area of his palace. It had a balcony which overlooked all of the city. Vargid decided to look around the city there. He enjoyed looking around the landscape of a city from a balcony. It always made him feel ready. Ready in case of an attack. After 25 years as a sellsword, he had not lived that long by lowering his guard. He kept alive by remaining assured by the security of where he was. So, how is it that we can benefit each other? Asked Valeries' counterpart. Vargid turned to see Valeries smirk slightly. From many things, Your Grace. For instance, were Pentos to join the Triarchy, as an ally and fellow free city, then you can be assured that no laws imposed on the wondrous free city of Pentos by your Bravo Sea rivals would ever hold any sway again. Not when Pentos now is in possession of a greater power. Pentos and its people would be free to do as it pleased. No longer would merchants have to hold up the banners of other free cities to trade slaves here merely to flout Bravo Sea laws. Pentos would be free to hire free companies, build armies and fleets. And most of all, stand strong amongst all other free cities. Vargid turned to Prince Tychidos. And you can guarantee this, can you, Your Excellency? Oh, more than certainly, Your Grace, he replied with a charming smile. He nodded at that. With words like that, I am persuaded. I shall bring this to the Council of Magisters, he said before the two shook hands. First Volantis. Now Pentos. Whom next? Notes. Brynden writes for Casterly Rock to treat with Tywin Lannister. And Valeries now has a new ally, Pentos, a free city brought low after losing wars with Bravos and being enforced with punitive laws, such as abolishing slavery. Chapter 86, A Blackfish in a Lion's Den. Summary. Tyjet welcomes a guest to Casterly Rock. Whilst Ned and Ashura begin expanding on their plans of building anew in the north. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Tyjet 11. The gates of the Lion's Mouth opened. And as they opened, Tyjet rode through, a mounted party of household knights of Casterly Rock followed behind him. And at both his flanks, marched a platoon of the Red Cloaks of Lannisport. All to welcome their visitor. Awaiting them outside, stood an old friend and comrade of Tyjet's. From the fierce fighting in the War of the Nine Penny Kings. Tyjet remembered clearly of fighting alongside he and his brother at Dwarfstone against the pirates that answered to Maelys the Monstrous. And again, at Bloodstone when they faced the bulk of the Golden Company. He rode closer to the renowned Blackfish. He whom had come at the behest of his brother, Lord Hoster. The ambitious Lord of Riverrun. Whom had already wed his second daughter to the heir to the Eyrie. The intended groom of his first daughter was dead, murdered by Aes the Mad, and his brother was already wed. So, it left little imagination for Tyjet as to why he had come. It was clear as the western sunshine shining down on them. If Hoster Tully cannot have his daughter wed and be Lady of Winterfell, he will have her wed and be Lady of Casterly Rock. Had Jaime not been imprisoned in the Kingsguard, I have no doubt he would have pursued Jaime for Catelyn Tully rather than Brandon Stark. Brynden. Tyjet called. Tyjet. Still have a lion's roar in your voice, Brynden replied before the two chuckled and shook hands. It's been a long time, Blackfish. Still trying to jump high like your brother? Jump high? No, never. Just enjoying the waters I swim whilst my brother wants to jump from this river to the next. Though, moving on, I heard some startling rumors on my way here, Tijet. What gossip have you heard, Blackfish? Tijet asked with a smirk. He smirked in reply. I heard that you were wounded fighting the Stark boy at Spring Falls. Tell me that isn't true. Tijet grimaced slightly as he felt an itch in his scar from where the young wolf had cut him with his great sword. Why don't you tell me? The Starks knew exactly where to find us. And every other army that answered Aes call. They had conveniently excellent knowledge of where they were fighting and how to use local geography against us. And no scout, not even the best in the world, can be as good as that. Not without the whole world knowing of that. No. Eddard Stark had local help. And if what Pycelle said to Tywine was true, that Aes wanted Catelyn Tully dead in case she was carrying Brandon's child, then that is just cause for you Tullys to help. That may be true. Though come to the sparring yard later and I will show you exactly what a lion does to little river fish, Tijet replied. The Blackfish grinned. The lion is welcome to try. Though the lion should remember that all fish swim. Even the black ones. Whereas lions can barely swim to eat a floating deer corpse, he replied. The two shared a chuckle before Tijet maneuvered his horse around. Brynden followed him through the lion's mouth and up the steps to the rock itself. I heard that the weddings your brother hosted in Riverrun were nothing short of spectacular. Indeed. It was good to see my beautiful little niece wed. And, as your sharp Lannister intellect may have guessed already, that is why I am here. Well, you are at least correct on our sharp Lannister intellect. Which, as always, is as sharp as Valyrian steel. Though thinking of Valyrian steel annoyed Tijet. For again, he felt a sudden itch on his scar. The first sword scar I have had in years. Not since my days as a squire have I had a scar from fighting. I am just that skilled. Or at least I thought that I was. Until I met Eddard Stark. They reached the end of the stairway, at the entrance to Casterly Keep. Stood there were Tywine, Kevan, Geryon, Jenna, Iman, Cersei, Jaime and Tyrion. Brynden and Tijet both climbed down from their horses. It didn't escape Tijet's notice how Jaime looked in awe at Brynden. I still remember him pretending he was the Blackfish at the Stepstones, cutting down the pirates at Grey Gallows and slaying Spotted Tom the Butcher at Bloodstone. And I remember him returning from his time at Riverrun as a boy, where he talked of meeting the Blackfish in reverence and how he was more interested in his stories than in courting Lysa Tully. Sir Brynden, welcome to Casterly Rock, said Tywine. Brynden shook hands with Tywine, Kevan and Geryon before he smiled as he kissed the hands of Jenna and Cersei. He turned to Jaime with a hint of recognition. I remember you well at Riverrun, young Sir Jaime. Always asking for tales of the Stepstones, he commented. I hope to have my own tales to tell one day, Sir Brynden, he replied. Of that I have no doubt. As the future Lord of Casterly Rock, you will have many stories to tell, he remarked before shaking his hands and patting him on the shoulder. Tijet smiled when he saw how Jaime flushed at being complimented by one of his childhood heroes. Tijet watched as the Blackfish met with Tywine in his solar. Tywine wanted no interruptions. Because of this, Tijet sat with Jaime, Cersei and Tyrion in the dining hall. Why is the Blackfish here, uncle? Asked Jaime. Cersei meanwhile snarled in disgust at the mere presence of Tyrion. Tywine should have had her warded somewhere. Somewhere where she could have learned some decorum and to know that just because she is a Lannister, doesn't mean that she will always get what she wants. Which principally includes becoming queen. Probably to marry you off to Hoster Tully's daughter, Catelyn. A beautiful maiden if the stories are true, Tyrion answered for Tijet. Very beautiful indeed, Tyrion. I saw for myself when I was in Harrenhal, Tijet replied with a smile. Such a match is unworthy of the future Lord of Casterly Rock, uncle. Tijet rolled his eyes at his niece's stupidity. Gods, help me, having to put up with Tywine's stupid daughter. Why could she have not been like Joanna? She was beautiful, kind, gentle, respectful and loved by all she had met. Unlike her and her father, I could never blame Tyrion for her death. She loved Tyrion, even with her last dying breath. So, whom would you have Jaime wed, Cersei? What is your contribution to the future of House Lannister that would secure House Lannister's prestige and power across the Seven Kingdoms? That would see House Lannister gain allies and not stand alone amongst the other kingdoms. Tidget asked with a raised brow. Jaime should wed one who is worthy of him, she replied with a frown, as though she didn't like being snapped at or argued with. It's clear that Tywin never took the time to tutor his own children. Had he done so, Cersei be better educated and not obsessed with House Lannister being supreme and above all others. And Jaime would have been molded into a knowledgeable player of the game. If this goes well, then he will. A marriage with the Tullys of Riverrun will guarantee a steady stream of crops from the Riverlands into the Westerlands should we have winters that would be harmful to our own farms, Tidget replied. And their alliance with the Starks would help us make use of the Kaelin Canal, Tyrion pointed out, at which Tidget nodded. You are not a part of this, imp. And you will never be a true Lannister of Casterly Rock, Cersei snapped. Tidget slapped his hand on the table. That's enough, Cersei, Tidget said with a shake of his head. You are not furthering the future of House Lannister right now. Tyrion has the potential to do great things for House Lannister. Whereas you have done little, if anything. I would do everything for House Lannister, Uncle, she snapped. Really? Well, you didn't do it well enough, especially at the tourney of Lannisport 7 years ago when you couldn't even charm the prince who is now our king, said Tyrion. Tidget stifled a grin at that. As did Jaime. Cersei fumed in fury before standing up and taking her leave. The doors opened. Tidget turned around to see Tywin and Brynden leave the solar. Cersei stopped where she was stood to face her father. She behaves like a lickspittle whenever her father is concerned. And for all her beliefs in House Lannister's supremacy, Eddard Stark proved otherwise on our prowess on the battlefield. Having met with Sir Brynden, we have reached an arrangement between the Riverlands and the Westerlands. Catelyn Tully shall wed Jaime 3 moons from now. In return for a dowry of 100,000 gold dragons, a share in future harvests of the Riverlands for the next 5 years and trading rights to Seaguard, Tywin announced. Tidget clapped and patted Jaime on the shoulder proudly. Eddard 18. What made good Queen Alysanne and King Jaehaerys think that the Night's Watch would benefit with the lands of the gift in the first place? Never. Not in short term. And not in long term. Since that day nearly 2.5 centuries ago, the lands are largely undeveloped and unused to agriculture and mining. And the Night's Watch have always been unable to protect the inhabitants from wilderling raids. There is so much potential in its land. Glass gardens could be built for villages. And mines could be mined in the hills. As Eddard, Ash, Benjen, Maester Wallers and Sir Roderick were sat in his solar, Eddard considered what should become of the lands of the gift now that they had rightfully been returned to the Lordship of the North rather than controlled by the Night's Watch. Eddard nodded as he looked on the map of the North that father always looked at. Though he knew that the map would have to be replaced soon. Replaced with an updated view of the North. For the Kaelin Canal was now fully constructed. Moat Cailin and Wolf's Den had both been fully restored. And works were underway for the construction of a castle on Sea Dragon Point and a city on the Stony Shore. Now that the lands of the gift have been restored, what can we do with them? Ash asked. Could they be awarded to someone, my lady? Once a castle has been built. Maester Wallers suggested. Eddard nodded. I agree. However, I think the land's too large for one lord alone to rule, Eddard said. Would you divide them then, perhaps, my lord? After all, the gift was split into 2. Between Brandon's gift and the new gift, said Sir Roderick. Eddard nodded with a smile at that. A fine suggestion, Sir Roderick. A castle in each of the lands should do fine. They needn't be grand castles, just large enough to call home and rule over the respective lands, Eddard said. I hope that these lands and the new castles will not just be awarded to spare sons of House Stark, asked Benjen. They will not, no, Benjen. There is an abundance of land and plenty of worthy noble families whom are without lands to call home. I am sure that they would be deserving of such lordships, said Ash. House Castle and Poole are both without land. They have both served House Stark for centuries. It is only right that such houses are awarded their own lands. Shall I send word to Master Theofred then, my lord? To begin work in the gift to build these 2 castles, asked Maester Wallers. Do so, Eddard replied. Maester Wallers left the solar to write to father's best architect, Theofred Haukel, whom restored both Moat Cailin and Wolf's Den, having impressed father by restoring the first keep of Winterfell as well as the broken tower. "And how goes our development efforts in the Riverlands?" asked Benjen. "Very well. Our friends in the Guild of Crafters are glad of the respite from the cold climate of the north and in the warmer climate of the Riverlands. Already they have built a few dams across the Riverlands and are making headway on the aqueducts and widening the roads before they add rocks and oils to them," said Eddard. "Indeed. Hoster Tully has even begun plans to restore ruined castles across the Riverlands and for them to be awarded to spare grandsons or worthy nobility," said Ash. "Chief amongst them is Old Stones. Once home to Tristifer Mudfor. What a warrior he must have been. To have defeated the Andal invaders in 99 battles. I hope that Lord Tully doesn't get too greedy with what we have provided him," said Benjen. "We all do. But it is his country, what he does is his choice. And if he sees fit to restore castles, for noble families to call home and for small folk to settle and work, all the better. Thanks to the North building glass gardens, we will not have to purchase as much food from them, therefore they can keep more of it to themselves come winter." Maester Wallers returned. "I have sent the letter, my lord," he said. "Thank you, Maester. Now, was there anything else?" asked Eddard. "One thing, my lord. Are we going to limit what the North and House Stark can offer the Seven Kingdoms to merely our friends and allies in the Riverlands?" asked Maester Wallers. "Did you have others in mind, Maester?" asked Ash. "I did, my lady. Houses Arryn and Baratheon. They helped and were of great service in the war. And it would be a suitable way of gratitude for them," he said. Eddard hummed and nodded. "A good idea," Ned thought aloud. "Will we extend the offer to them by letter or make the agreement in person?" asked Ash. "By letter, my love. And if needs be, I can go myself to meet with either John or Robert to discuss the agreement in person. And if all goes well, we can improve the lot of the Vale and the Stormlands, that these countries become stronger and more powerful," Eddard replied. Notes: Caitlin and Jaime are now betrothed. And Ned and Ashura plan to extend trade agreements with their allies in the Vale and the Stormlands. Chapter 87, A Beneficial Offer. Summary. Lysa and Lyanna both are settling into their new homes and in their married lives. Just as letters come to both the Eyrie and to Storm's End, from Winterfell. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Elbereth 12. In the balcony of the Maiden's Tower, Elbereth held Lysa's hand as they looked down. From the balcony, they had a clear view of the Giant's Lance and many miles of the Vale below and around them. Lysa exhaled deeply as she shivered at what she saw. "It's so beautiful," she said. "It is, Lysa. It is indeed. We stand over 1.5 miles above the Bloody Gate and the Eastern Road. But beyond here is the Vale of Arryn. And from here, we have a clear view of the Vale, all at our feet," Elbereth said proudly. "And how often does the nobility of the Vale come here?" she asked. "They come from time to time. At least once every few moons for a feast Uncle John hosts here. Because of the difficulty in getting here, it is better to host them rarely to make the occasion grander and make it worth the long trek up here," Elbereth explained. "And what is that, down there by the water?" "That is Iron Oaks, right next to Lake Iron, which is connected by a river to the narrow sea," replied Elbereth. Lysa inhaled and exhaled as she hugged her fur cloak around her shoulders and wrapped her gentle and small hands in them. "Here, let me," he offered before holding her hands. "Does that feel better?" he asked. She blushed as she giggled. "Yes, Elbereth," she replied with a wide smile. "Elbereth?" "Yes," he asked as they sat down whilst Elbereth rubbed his hands over hers. "I heard it said that the wildlings of the Vale are ever a problem. As are the sea raiders of the Three Sisters." "You heard true. Though Uncle John has done well to keep them at bay, they often grow to be a problem. Why have the kings in King's Landing not done anything? Because they are always focused on other things than ever worrying about things such as this. We are often forced to deal with these problems by ourselves," he replied. "Would Father's armies be able to help if it became serious?" she asked. "I do not see why not. Though the problem is that whenever one marches to fight the wildlings, they retreat in good order. You see, they never fight honorably. They always attack from the shadows when one's back is turned. And as for the system and sea raiders, They attack villages and fishing vessels and always leave no survivors so that none will tell from whence they came or where they go next. And then there's the fact that we have few warships that could chase after them, he explained. Lord Elbert. Lord Elbert. Elbert and Lysa turned around. There was Maester Coleman. My lord. My lady. Lord Arryn summons you both to his solar, he said. Elbert turned to her. Let's go, he said, still holding her hand as they stood up and walked together. They made their way from the Maiden's Tower to Uncle John's solar in the Moon Tower. It had been 2 weeks since they had arrived in the Eyrie from Riverrun. Lysa was beginning to like her new home, Elbert was glad to see. But he was also being gentle with her. Their wedding day had not advanced to anything beyond a few kisses in the Great Hall of Riverrun and more kisses in their bedding. Elbert did not want to force his way with Lysa. Especially when he could see that she was not ready for such a thing. As they opened the doors, Elbert saw Uncle John looking up from his desk, smiling at them. Elbert. Lysa. Do please sit down, he invited. Elbert sat down with Lysa whilst Maester Coleman stood by Uncle John. What could this be about? Is something wrong? Innocently asked Lysa. No, no. Not at all, my dear. But a raven has just arrived and I think it would do for you, both of you, to learn how to rule and how to make decisions and decrees so that you are ready when the time comes for you both to rule the Vale, said Uncle John. Lysa looked pleased at the opportunity to learn and to take an active part in the stewardship of the Vale. Whom is the raven from, Uncle? Asked Elbert. It is from Ned. He writes to offer a trading alliance with the Vale, he explained before Maester Coleman passed the letter in question to Elbert. Elbert held up the letter. He positioned it to allow Lysa to read the letter with him. She smiled at that. Elbert looked down to read it. To John. It was wonderful to see you again, John, in Riverrun. And to see Elbert wed to the lovely Lysa Tully. I only regret that such meetings will be rare from now on. But, to business. As you will have heard from the Riverlands, I have made a trading alliance with Hoster Tully. The details of which include building Yutish dams for rivers, Valyrian roads to replace dirt roads around the Riverlands and Bravo Sea aqueducts. These foreign architectural pieces are of great value. They have proven so in the north, and I would offer the same for the Vale. For as Maester Coleman would tell you, they are incredible quality and the aqueducts and dams would provide much needed water to isolated villages, towns and keeps. And the roads would make travel far easier and are roads paved with oil and stone. As well as these, I would offer to build glass gardens and mines across the Vale to improve the state of the Vale's economy as well as providing more food for the Vale, especially in times of winter. Lastly, I would offer a discounted use of the Kalin Canal of 25% for the Vale. Do let me know your answer to my proposal soon. Yours sincerely. Ned. Gods. All of these things would be of enormous benefit to the Vale. More perhaps. But, what of the hill tribes and the sea raiders? Will they hinder our efforts? What do you both think? Asked Uncle John. It is an incredible offer, Uncle. It amazes me what Ned offers, said Elbert. Maester Coleman, what are these foreign improvements he speaks of? Asked Lysa. Maester Coleman, whom, as always liked to talk, was glad of the question. My lady, first the Yutish dams. They are built to limit the flow of a river. Whilst they do not completely block a river's flow, they do limit it, making it easier to collect fresh water. It is also a useful shield against something such as a dangerous flood which could wipe out villages and hamlets. The Bravo Sea aqueducts, another great thing, my lady. They are used in Bravos to provide fresh water from a river in one place to an isolated village in the middle of nowhere miles away, for example. And as for the Valyrian roads, they dot the landscapes of the Valyrian freehold, my lady. They are thrice as wide as dirt roads here in Westeros and are paved, as Lord Eddard says, with oil and stone. Making it easier to travel on. And because of their width, it makes travel swifter, for merchant caravans and for armies on the march. Such improvements would be of monumental importance to the Vale. As well as the building of mines of marble, quarried stone, iron and minerals in the hills and mountains. And the glass gardens will provide more food for our people, making us less reliant on the Riverlands and the Reach, said Uncle John. But what of the hill tribes, Uncle? Will they be a problem? Asked Elbert. I don't see why they should. Certainly, they may try and attack and steal what they can. But, so long as we have sizable forces of soldiers protecting the construction sites and the workers building on them, then we have no reason to fear them, said Uncle John. So, we will accept then, asked Lysa. We will. Lionel X. Lionel spat with disgust. She took a cup of water and emptied half of the cup in her mouth. And she washed the last of the vomit from her mouth. She gargled and spat it down before drinking the rest of the contents of the cup. Gods, that is foul. Lionel. Are you well, my love? Lionel groaned as she stood up from the privy. She opened the door to see Robert. I am now, she said with a weak smile before holding his hand. Come. Let's get you to Maester Cresson, he said with a worried grimace. I'm fine, Robert, she insisted. You are sick. I do not want my lady love so unwell, he said with conviction as he led the way, still holding her hand. Lionel was glad how Robert cared for her and how good he was to her. It made her think of how stupid she was in how she thought of him as a whoremongering drunk that would never be faithful to her. The past few weeks since marrying in Riverrun had proven otherwise to her. And her time spent in Storm's End, speaking with Stannis and Renly and their great-uncle Harbert, Lionel liked it in Storm's End. And she liked hearing Harbert tell her about Robert. From him, she understood more of Robert and why he did what he did as a boy. They arrived at Maester Cresson's solar. My lord. My lady, he said, standing from his chair. Lady Lionel is unwell, Robert said. I am fine, she insisted once more before she sat down next to Maester Cresson's desk. You were vomiting, Lionel, Robert pointed out. Vomiting? Maester Cresson asked before walking to her side. He examined Lionel's face and then he raised a brow. He hummed before he stood straight. Did you eat anything this morning that might have caused this bout, my lady? Just a few things. The same last night. I was really hungry both times. But I couldn't stomach any wine last night, she added. Saying that seemed to have made him think something, she thought as she saw how his eyes lit up. I don't think you are sick, my lady. I think that you may be with child. What? I carry a child. Lionel inhaled and exhaled heavily as Maester Cresson took a knee beside her. Are you certain, Cresson? Asked Robert. I will know for certain when I make a more specific examination, he replied. An examination of what? Asked Lionel as Robert held her hand over her shoulder. Of your womb, my lady. If it has changed in color, then that means that there is an increased blood flow. Which means that you are most certainly with child, he explained. Lionel exhaled deeply as she held Robert's hands whilst Maester Cresson lifted her dress and began to examine her womb. Motherhood, Lionel thought, was a frightening thing. Especially when she remembered how Mother died giving birth to Benny. Though she loved Benny dearly, she would always remember just how Mother screamed that night. Lionel's grip on Robert's hands tightened as she feared of being like Mother. Dying to bring a child into the world. It's all right, Lionel. I'm right here, said Robert before gently leaning in and kissing her cheek. Lionel smiled and kissed back. Just as Maester Cresson stood back up. It is confirmed, my lady. My lord. My lady, you are indeed with child. I would think that you shall give birth in at least 7 moons, at most 8, he said. I am with child, Lionel thought nervously. Both she and Robert shared another kiss before she stood up. My lord. A raven just came, from Winterfell. Winterfell. Lionel inhaled and exhaled as she heard mention of her home. Robert took the letter. Come with me to my solar, Cresson said Robert before he walked with Lionel. He turned to the nearest guardsman. Goran. Bring my uncle Harbert and my brother Stannis to my solar, he said. Yes, my lord. In Robert's solar, Lionel sat down beside him, holding his hand whilst Maester Cresson sat beside them, with the opened and read letter in his lap. Just as Stannis and Harbert arrived. Is all well, Robert? Asked Harbert. Indeed, uncle. Lionel and I shall soon welcome a new Baratheon in 8 moons from now, Robert replied proudly before kissing Lionel's cheek. My congratulations, Lionel. Robert, lad, said Harbert with a proud smile before patting Robert's shoulder and Lionel's shoulder. Was that all? Stannis asked dully. Not all, no, brother. We received a letter from Winterfell, from my good brother Ned. What does the letter entail? Asked Harbert. Ned says that he wants to make a trading alliance with the Stormlands. We gain a discounted use of the Kalin Canal of 25%. And the North will build aqueducts, dams and Valyrian roads in the Stormlands, said Robert. He suggests that we cannot build such improvements ourselves. Stannis asked dully. Stannis, this is a special gift. And one that will be of enormous benefit to the Stormlands. I have seen these in person. When I went traveling across the free cities as a boy. They are of incredible quality. And will benefit the Stormlands 100-fold, said Harbert. Indeed. And he also offers to send resource surveyors to the Stormlands, whom will be able to see what can be mined in the Stormlands as well as what can be farmed, Robert continued. This is an incredible deal, Robert. One in which the Stormlands shall all thrive and benefit from. And make that ginger retard, John Connington, an envious bastard indeed, said Harbert. All that Father achieved for the North will be shared with the allies of the North. Father would be so happy if he could see this. I hope that he would be proud of me. I am Lady of Storm's End now. And carry the future of Storm's End inside me. Notes. Both Jon Arryn and Robert have agreed. Which shall increase the power and wealth of their respective countries. Chapter 88, Roses Spread Afar. Summary. The Targaryens welcome Mace Tyrell to King's Landing. And the small council receive news of goings-on in the Seven Kingdoms, as well as in the Free Cities. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Rhaegar 15. Rhaegar scratched an anxious itch on his neck as he stood in the courtyard of the Red Keep. He stood with the newest additions to the King's Guard by his side. Sir Lylcra Hall, the Strong Boar. And Sir Geoffrey Mallister, the Red Eagle. Elia, Mother and Jon also stood with them as they were ready to greet the arrival of the Lord of Highgarden. Mace Tyrell had come on the invitation of Rhaegar. On Elia's suggestion, for how he led the armies of the Reach in the war, though he was defeated at Juniper Hall. As he stood there, Varys appeared. My king. My queens, he said as he bowed his small and bald head. What news is there of the Tyrell entourage, Lord Varys? Asked Mother. Lord Tyrell comes with a small entourage of knights and soldiers, your grace. And only a small number of his family. A small number? Asked Mother. Yes, your grace. Lady Tyrell gave birth recently to Lord Tyrell's daughter Margaery, and so both are taking time in Highgarden to recover on the recommendation of their maester, he explained. So whom does accompany him? Asked Rhaegar. Just his eldest son, Willers, the heir to Highgarden, your grace, replied Varys. But not the Lady Olenna? Asked Elia. She does not come, no, my queen, said Varys before he took his leave. Rhaegar raised a brow at that. What does it matter if Mace Tyrell's mother comes or not? What good does that do if Lady Olenna comes or not? Asked Rhaegar. A great deal, Rhaegar, replied Elia. Indeed. The Lady Olenna is a very prickly and shrewd negotiator. Thankfully, with only Lord Tyrell in attendance to worry about, there is nothing for us to be concerned with, Mother explained. The gates to the Red Keep opened. And through them entered a few dozen household knights and soldiers of House Tyrell. And at the head of them, was the Lord of Highgarden, sat on his fine thoroughbred stallion of chestnut color, like the coloring of Lord Tyrell's hair, Rhaegar noticed. Lord Tyrell climbed down from his horse. Behind him, on a smaller horse, was the heir to Highgarden, Willers Tyrell. A boy of 7, who eagerly looked around with a fascinated curiosity. Which only reminded Rhaegar of himself when he was Willers' age. He had an endearing charm to him, which made Rhaegar smile. I wonder if we have the same interests, Rhaegar wondered. The corpulent warden of the south knelt to Rhaegar. Your grace, it is an honor like none other to be invited to the capital, he said with a jovial smile. Arise, Lord Tyrell, said Rhaegar. He did so, and Rhaegar smiled as he shook hands with him. Soon after the reception, Rhaegar was sat with Elia and Jon in his solar. As Rhaegar began to reread a letter recently sent from Great Uncle Aemon at the wall, there was a knock on the door. Your grace. Lord Tyrell is here for his appointment, said the Red Eagle. Bid him inside, Sir Geoffrey. Sir Geoffrey opened the door. The Lord of Highgarden sat down opposite Rhaegar. Lord Tyrell, I shall get straight to it. Your loyalty in a time of uncertainty and war only recently has been much appreciated. Though the war ended in ways none had foreseen, your loyalty and that of the brave fighting men of the Reach has not gone unnoticed. Mace Tyrell eagerly smiled at the speech as he inhaled and exhaled gently at what Rhaegar could get to. In recognition of this, Lord Tyrell, House Targaryen is prepared to reward House Tyrell with the lordships of the castles of Dunstanbury and Whitegrove. That you might award the 2 castles to the most deserving men of House Tyrell, said Elia with a sweet smile. Lord Tyrell looked very intrigued by the news. That is very generous, my king and queen. Gratitude has almost taken a hold of my tongue, he said. Well, Lord Tyrell, what happens next is your choice, said Elia. My choice, my queen, he asked. It was then that Jon spoke. What Her Grace means, Lord Tyrell, is that if you tell me whom you feel are the most deserving of the titles of the lordships of Dunstanbury and Whitegrove, I shall get to work in my solar right away and produce the documents of lordship and bring them to you tonight, that you might award them in person, Jon explained. I see. Thank you, Lord Hand, he said before pausing. He pursed his lips in consideration before replying. I should think my cousins, Sir Theodore and Sir Limmer, he stated. Jon wrote those names down on a parchment before he stood up from his chair and left Rhaegar's solar for the Tower of the Hand. I would like to once again give my eternal gratitude to you, my king, for your kindness, said Lord Tyrell. That is quite all right, Lord Tyrell, said Rhaegar with a smile before they shook hands. And I hope you enjoy your stay in the capital before your return home to Highgarden. I know that you must be eager to get back to your lady wife and daughter Margaery, said Elia with a beaming smile. Yes, quite so, my queen. It was a difficult time for my Aeleri, he said with a concerned expression. But she is well now, Lord Tyrell, asked Elia. She is, my queen. And shall be glad to know that the Red Keep thinks of her, he said. Indeed we do, Lord Tyrell, Elia said charmingly and pleasantly. Lucerys 9. Lord Tyrell eagerly returned to Highgarden, your grace, and awarded his 2 cousins the lordships of Dunstanbury and Whitegrove, said Varys. I take it that they wasted no time in moving to their new homes, Lord Varys, asked Lucerys with a chuckle. Indeed they did not, Lord Valerian, Varys replied. Lord Tyrell has written to the Citadel and to King's Landing to state the names of the houses of his new subjects and what their sigils are, your grace, said Pycelle. I shall be sure to look at your report later, Grand Maester, said the king with a nod before he turned to Lucerys. Lord Valerian, what news is there from the Iron Islands, asked the king. Nothing but good news. Both for the Iron Islands and House Greyjoy. But also for Driftmark and House Valerian, Lucerys thought with pride. For ever since his trading deal with Quarian Greyjoy, the stipends sent every moon he would send to Driftmark were of great benefit to him in his projects. For the Valerian fleet had grown from 10 merchant ships and 5 warships to 30 merchant ships and 18 warships. And the fleet still grew, thanks to a steady stream of high-quality wood from the Summer Isles and the north. And as for the restoration works at High Tide and Spicetown, both had been completely finished. Lucerys had moved his entire household to High Tide. And he had decreed for Castle Driftmark to remain as the home of the heir to House Valerian once they were old enough, that they would learn to rule when the time had come for them to rule as Master of Driftmark and Lord of the Tides. All is very good, my king. Harlon Greyjoy has currently built trade posts in the Riverlands and the Crown Lands. The merchant captains of the Iron Islands have been providing a steady stream of resources from lands afar, and providing a lawful income for the Iron Islands. The raiding and reaving associated with the Iron Islands is ceasing, bit by bit, Lucerys said. The king nodded with a smile. But it was then that Varys motioned. From how he gestured, Lucerys could see that he had something of importance to say. I pray that this is only about the Triarchy. For I hope that the king does not learn to fear and hate the north as Aerys had. Your grace, there is news from the Riverlands, he said. The Riverlands. Is this about Hoster Tully wedding his daughter to Elbereth Arryn? Or had he found a groom for his other daughter? Or a bride for his son and heir? And that is, asked the queen. Lord Tully has made a trading alliance with the north. The details of which including great improvements for the Riverlands, such as Valyrian roads, Bravo Sea aqueducts and Yetish dams, he explained. Lucerys' eyes opened wide at the mention of these 3 architectural marvels. What are these things, Lord Varys? Asked the queen. My queen, Valyrian roads are roads found in the Valyrian freehold. Thrice as wide as a dirt road and raised a few feet off of the ground and are reinforced by rock and oil. Bravo sea aqueducts transport water from a river to settlements lacking in water, and dams are to limit a river's flow for the sake of providing fresh water and prevent devastating floods, Lucerys explained, knowing from his exploits as a sailor and as heir to Driftmark. And how is it that Eddard Stark is capable of building these? Asked the king, seemingly frustrated. From contacts Lord Rickard had made in the Volanten Guild of Crafters, Your Grace, when he was building the Kalin Canal and restoring ruined castles across the north, my king, he explained. Such improvements will be of incredible benefit to the Riverlands. If these roads are as Lord Valerian says, then merchants would have far easier times transporting their merchandise, said Miles Mouton. But Lucerys realized exactly why the king was so frustrated. He is angry because he feels weak that Eddard Stark is providing these to his allies. When as king, one would think that the duty falls to him to provide his subjects with such improvements. It would be an ever greater thing, Sir Miles, if Eddard Stark were to share such improvements to all of the realm. However, he has chosen to limit it only to his friend, the Lord of Riverrun, said John Connington. Well, that's true as well. And therefore depriving such things to all of the realm. It would appear that the Riverlands is not alone in receiving such offers, Lord Hand said Varys. Lucerys frowned when he saw how the king's angry violet eyes turned to the Master of Whispers. I fear that our king is succumbing to the same madness which consumed his father. And which eventually caused him to die. Paranoia of the North and the activities of the Starks. Whom had received such offers? Asked the king. Lucerys frowned when the Master of Whispers answered the question. Jon Arryn of the Eyrie and Eddard Stark's good brother, Robert Baratheon, my king. Both of whom have accepted his offer, said Varys. Lucerys frowned when he saw how the king frowned. I must distract him. Before he forgets just how dangerous Eddard Stark is. And how he holds the realm's future by its throat with a dagger. All it took for him to inflict such chaos and devastation to the realm was a small army of 30,000 Northerners. If he brought the full fighting strength of the best fighting men of the North, then there is no telling what might happen. At last, Lucerys realized what to say. Lord Varys. Have your little birds brought you any songs of the Triarchy? All turned to him at the question. And then to Varys for an answer. Indeed, Lord Valerian. This morning, my boyhood friend in Pentos, Illyrioma Patis, brought me very interesting news. Valerys Daltala has recently returned to Lys from a trip to Pentos, where he met the prince himself, he explained. He's gathering more allies for the Triarchy, Lucerys realized. He turned to the king, whom frowned at the news. And the implications it brought. So, the Triarchy can once again count another free city as an ally, asked the king. Yes, your grace, he replied. Notes. The fierce Queen of Thorns is probably glad to be rid of useless Tyrells spread around Highgarden and doing nothing. And now Lucerys sees that Rhaegar has become paranoid of the North and of Ned, just as Aerys had. Chapter 89, The Heir to Riverrun. Summary. Catelyn is presented the choice for her future. Whilst Tywin makes his own plans for the future with Cersei in mind. And Brynden begins to warm to his nephew. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Catelyn 7. Catelyn gave the letter to Maester Vimen, whom promptly sealed the letter, and Catelyn watched as the raven flew from the rookery and in the direction of the east. As Catelyn returned to her chambers, she thought of her sister. Wed to the future Lord of the Eyrie. But so far from the only home she had ever known. I miss Lysa. I hope that she is happy. But I do miss my dear sister. Elbereth is a good man. And he will be good to her. Cat. Catelyn turned around to see Uncle Brynden. He was beaming as he saw her and walking to her side. Uncle Brynden, she said with a smile. Whom is the letter for? He asked with a smile. For Lysa. Just to enquire as to how she is and that I hope she will be happy in the Eyrie with Elbereth, she replied. Ah, she will be fine, I am sure of that. Elbereth Arryn is a good lad. I saw for myself in Harrenhal and in the war. But she will be happy to be receiving letters from you, Cat, he said before patting her shoulder. Catelyn smiled at that before Uncle Brynden gestured to the great hall. Come. Your father wishes to see you, he said. Caitlin walked with Uncle Brindon and followed him back to the Great Hall. On the way, she could hear sounds of fighting from the sparring yard. From a nearby window, Caitlin peered down. And she could see Ed Muir sparring with Sir Desmond. She smiled to see Ed Muir fighting so skillfully with tricks and tactics he could have only learned from Uncle Brindon. And since Uncle Brindon's return home from the Northerners' rebellion, Ed Muir had been determined to fight as Uncle Brindon would. Is that your brother? Caitlin nodded as Uncle Brindon looked down at him alongside her. Your brother learns by the day, little cat. He'll make a fine knight one day and Lord of Riverrun, he said before patting her shoulder. As they continued walking together, Caitlin turned to Uncle Brindon. Would it amount to anything in a battle, Uncle? She asked nervously. Ah, fear not, cat. No man was as good as Eamon the Dragon Knight at 11. He still has a lot to learn before he can hold his own on the battlefield and lead men to fight, he explained. They arrived at Father's Solar. Caitlin smiled as she entered. And Father was beaming with delight at seeing her. Oh, my cat. I have good news to bring to you, he said. Good news? What could this be? Does he have a new groom for me? Or is it something else? What could this be, Father? She asked. Father sat up as he faced her whilst Uncle Brindon stood by her side. Nearly a moon ago now, your Uncle Brindon returned from the Westerlands. There he met with Tywin Lannister and his eldest son, Sir Jaime, recently released from the Kingsguard and once again the heir to Casterly Rock. Sir Jaime. I remember seeing him in Harrenhal. One of the most handsome young men I have ever seen. But so young to be joining the Kingsguard, I thought. And I am to wed Sir Jaime, Father. You are. And I have it on good authority from your uncle that Sir Jaime is a very handsome young man. Very skilled with a sword and lance. And he is a good young man also. Sure to be a fine husband for you. But of course, that is if you want this, he said. What does he mean by if I want this? What does Father mean? What do you mean, Father? She asked. I know that it hasn't been easy for you ever since the murder of Bran. I know that you loved him very much. So, I will understand if you wish to not wed at all. Caitlin shook her head. No, Father. I am a Tully of Riverrun. And the words of our house are family, duty, honor. I will do my duty and wed him if you would have it of me. Both Father and Uncle Brindon beamed proudly at her. I would never demand this of you, cat. I would only ask it of you. For you have been through such terrible things that no young lady should ever go through, said Father before he kissed her cheek and gently hugged her. Tidget 12. Tidget sat with Tywin, Kevan, Geryon, Jaime and Jenna in Tywin's Solar. As Jaime had now returned and was heir to Casterly Rock once again, Tywin was ensuring that he attend all meetings with his brothers and sister there to help guide Jaime to his fate as Warden of the West. Though Tidget could see the similarities of himself in Jaime. Jaime was born a lion that was bred for war. Not as a lion bred for the Game of Thrones. That role falls to Tyrion. Though not a physically great lion, he is great in what truly matters. If only Tywin could see that. Tidget looked at Tywin with a curious eye before he glanced at Kevan, Geryon and Jenna. They had all said the same thing to Tywin beforehand. That he had to take an active part in teaching Jaime his role as Lord of Casterly Rock. For he had spent years as a hostage of Varys and that he had to learn from his father and not as Tywin had done. Now comes the other matter at hand, said Tywin, keeping his eyes fixed on Jaime. What is that, Father? Asked Jaime. A long time ago, soon after Queen Elia gave birth to Prince Aegon and Princess Visenya, I had made plans to restore the ruins of Castemaria and Tarbeck Hall and to convert Castellon into a castle worthy to call home. Said plans have now come to fruition. I thought that the former two were to remain symbols of what happens when one makes an enemy of House Lannister, asked Jaime. They were. Until Rickard Stark restored the ruins of Moat Cailin and Wolf's Den to award to his other sons. One of whom now builds 3 new castles in the north, as well as a city, to award to spare sons and to award to northern noble families with no lands to their names, he explained. But why is this important? Tywin asked as he faced Jaime. To add more power to the Westerlands. There is that. But what is the single most important purpose in restoring lands and awarding them to landless nobility in one's kingdom? Asked Tywine. Tijet raised a brow at that. An interesting approach. Though it is one that he should have used long ago on all of his children. Cersei might be wiser and more sensible because of it. Jaime would know how to play the Game of Thrones. And Tyrion might be ready to serve as a worthy heir to Casterly Rock, rather than be the fixture of all of Tywine's hatred. To build upon House Lannister's legacy, Jaime answered. Yes. But what is a legacy? Tywine asked. Jaime had no answer for that. A legacy is building the foundations of a great beginning. And so long as that legacy is maintained and cared for, then nothing untoward will ever happen to it. So long as there is always one standing there to maintain that legacy. I have been fulfilling that duty my entire life. And it is up to you to do the same when I die. And you will be teaching your own sons that when you are wed and a father. Jaime nodded at Tywine's speech. Then, all 3 castles are ready for us to move into, brother? Asked Geryon. Not quite. First, small folk are still moving to these castles. Building villages and towns. And I shall be writing to the Red Keep to formally award these castles, to write deeds of lordship and have new houses formed to serve House Lannister and the Iron Throne, Tywine replied. There was a knock on the door. They all turned to the door. My lord, the Lady Cersei is here for her appointment. Show her in, said Tywine. Tijet rolled his eyes as Cersei entered Tywine's solar. You summoned me, father, she asked dutifully. I did. Though not in what I had originally meant for you, he replied. Tijet raised a brow when he saw how she haughtily frowned. I thought that you were planning to have Elia Martell removed, father, she demanded like a spoilt girl of 8. Tijet scoffed at his niece's arrogance. Perhaps the Silent Sisters would be a better fate for her. To serve as a lesson to all future ladies of House Lannister to behave, to do their duty, to be wise and not be so arrogant and supercilious or end up like Cersei. I made no such promises. But that is not why you are here. The time has come for you to be wed, said Tywine. But he is too young for me, father, she complained. Whom do you refer to? Tijet asked. Prince Aegon, uncle, she replied as though it was the most obvious of answers to the most stupid of questions. Tijet had to bite down on his lips to stop himself from laughing. For he knew just how much that Tywine hated and mistrusted laughter. Having done so ever since he was a boy because of how father's bannermen had all laughed at him. Either behind his back or to his face. You are not to wed him. By the time he is of age, you will be 31. Though still fertile, you would be the laughing stock of the 7 kingdoms. Laughter which would be an insult to House Lannister, Tywine replied with an annoyed and impatient glare. Then who? She asked. You are to wed Willers Tyrell, heir to Highgarden. She glared furiously at the news. The Tyrells, but father, she snapped like an overindulged little child. Is she going to start stomping her foot? Yes, the Tyrells, Kevan said as he rolled his eyes. The Tyrells are a house of usurping stewards. They are not worthy of a marriage with House Lannister, she boasted. You are stupid if you think that you represent all of House Lannister. You will do your duty as a Lannister. You are my daughter. She balked at Tywine, raising his voice. You were raised to do your duty as Lady of House Lannister. At first to one day be queen. That cannot be achieved now. But it will be achieved in the future. But you will have no part in that. For you will wed Willers Tyrell. The boy is 7 years old. No Leo Longthorn, it is true. Whom enjoys reading and loves the company of animals. I do pity him for one day being wed to her. I still think that Cersei could learn a lot from joining the Silent Sisters. Perhaps some humility. Brynden 9. Brynden thrusted his sword to Edmure. Edmure blocked it and tried to parry it aside with his shield. But Brynden drew his sword back and thrust his own shield towards Edmure. Edmure stumbled, but kept upright. He responded with a series of light swings with both sword and shield. Brynden blocked each blow with ease. And he could see Edmure was disciplined in each blow. He didn't attack with anger or impatience. Good. Anger is all well and good. But only in training. If you use anger, it will dissipate after a while. After that, You have nothing to keep angry to use as a weapon. Brynden watched as Edmure thrusted his sword at his chest. He raised his shield to block it. But as he tried to swing his sword to disarm him, Edmure held his own shield up, just above his sword, protecting it. And as Brynden's sword bounced against it, Edmure pressed on. He continued to thrust at Brynden, only for Brynden to cut at the sword. Next, Brynden swung his shield across at Edmure's helm. His helm fell from his head. Edmure did not grunt in pain. Nor did he reach for his head. He kept his mind focused on the task. For which Brynden was proud of him. Good lad. Never let any petty distractions turn your mind from your opponent. It will mean death on the battlefield. You let yourself get distracted, and any number of bad things will happen. Edmure pushed forward. Their swords met midair. Brynden pressed his sword against Edmure's. Edmure pushed back before he swung his shield across. Brynden nodded as he looked at his own sword. 3 feet away. Edmure paused before he thrusted at Brynden. Brynden blocked the thrust with his shield and smashed it across with both hands at Edmure's shield, knocking it from his grasp. In Edmure's confusion, Brynden took up his sword once again. Do you see what you did wrong there, Edmure? Yes, uncle. I thought the lesson over when I disarmed you, he replied with a nod. That's right. Now you fought very well. But never lower your guard. For not every man you fight will be a knight of honor. For there are many men out there whom will sacrifice what honor they do have, just to try and live. Brynden sat down next to Edmure as they put their shields and swords on the nearby racks. You are doing well, Edmure. Far better than your father or I ever could when we were your age, Brynden said as he patted his shoulder with pride. Edmure nodded at that and smiled. Uncle. Yes. I have heard that the Northerners are helping us, he asked as he drank from a water skin. Brynden nodded with pride. He was proud of his nephew fighting as well as he had done against him. That's right, Edmure. With building anew in the Riverlands with foreign architecture that will go a long way to improve the lives and livelihoods of our small folk. As well as rebuilding across the Riverlands, Brynden explained. To what end? Asked Edmure. He's asking the right questions. That is good. One should never be afraid to ask the right questions. Else they might never learn the answers. Well, the ruined castles of Old Stones, Muddy Hall, Old Forge, Nutton, Swinford and Breahwhite, the town of Stony September and the coastal castle your father is building north of the Cape of Eagles, is all to award to future bannermen, he explained. Edmure counted those names on his fingers. That's 8 settlements, uncle. Are there such bannermen to award these to? He asked. There are as far as the Freys are concerned. They will do all that they can to get these castles and lands. But, your father intends to award them, not only to landless nobility, noble families with no lands to call their own, but also to sons you will one day have, Brynden explained. Do you know whom father will have me wed, uncle? I don't, I'm afraid, lad. There are not many ladies amongst the Lord's paramount families. Which is why I have been suggesting to him that he wed you to a bannerman's daughter, Brynden explained. Edmure nodded at that. Just as long my wife will not be a Free, uncle, I will be happy, he said. Brynden smirked and chuckled at that before patting his back. That's my boy. Notes. Caitlin agrees to become Lady of Casterly Rock and wed Jaime. Whilst Cersei is angry at the news of her own future, which doesn't involve being anyone's queen. Poor Willers Tyrell. And Brynden is glad that Edmure is learning and is beginning to warm up to him. Chapter 90, The Kraken and the Direwolf. Summary. Harlon visits Winterfell to discuss trade with Ned. Whilst the Starks welcome a new member to the pack. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Harlon 8. Harlon admired the wolves of the north. They whom had fought against the armies of the south in the name of their murdered liege lord and his heir on the whim of a mad king. He admired the mighty Eddard Stark whom had led the northern army to victory 4 times against armies larger than his own. Even against the army of Tywin Lannister. A man whom father had said has the blood of the lion and the ruthlessness of Johanna Westerling whom did bring us low after the Red Kraken's throat was slit. Though it was Victorian whom had belittled all those whom felt fear of the old lion of Casterly Rock. What is there to fear from Tywin Lannister? That he drowned some arrogant and usurping mainlanders in Castamaria. We are Ironborn. We do not fear drowning. We welcome it, and we welcome the descent to the drowned god's hall. Eddard the young wolf showed the world that the old lion's roar is only ferocious when the odds are in his favor. But more than that, both Harlon and father had heard of a great many things from not only Eddard's reign as Lord of Winterfell since his victory in the Northerners' War, but also from his lord father Rickard the Southern Wolf. Of how he built not only the Kalin Canal, but of the Essozi improvements to the north. Which is what he was doing also for his friends in the Riverlands, the Stormlands and the Vale. Harlon had seen this for himself when he was in Eaglesford, observing the trade coming through the trade post. And he saw the builders widening the roads to build Valyrian roads, as well as the ones building the Bravo Sea aqueducts. These were feats of architecture which Harlon knew well from his voyages across the known world. He had seen plenty of these when sailing across the Free Cities and across Essos and the former Valyrian freehold. But to bring these things to Westeros was incredible. And it was something that father agreed they should bring to the Iron Islands. Which was why Harlon was riding through the Winter City and to the great keep of Winterfell. To meet with Eddard Stark. To have trade posts built in the north. And to have these great things built in the Iron Islands. As he looked around Winterfell, Harlon couldn't help but admire what he saw. A harsh but beautiful place is Winterfell, he decided as he looked around the great keep from where he rode. He climbed down from his horse. And met the young wolf. I remember meeting Brandon Stark at Harrenhal. He reminded me of Victorian. But Eddard, he reminds me of myself. Whilst not as big or as strong, he clearly has the look of a great warrior. He has to be after all the enemies he has fought. Wounding and defeating Barristan the Bold himself. Lord Harlon, welcome to Winterfell, said the Stark of Winterfell. My thanks, Lord Stark, Harlon replied before turning to Lady Stark. Harlon knew whom she was. When he danced at Harrenhal, he had danced with Ashura Dane, lady-in-waiting to Elia Martell, now Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Lady Stark. My congratulations, he said when he noticed the bump in her belly. My thanks, Lord Harlon. You have a son and a daughter yourself, do you not? She asked. I do. My girl Asha and my boy Theon. I do love them dearly, he replied with a smile, thinking of his children. I just hope that Alanis doesn't believe in the old way enough that she thinks that we must raise our children as father was raised. As my brothers were raised. As I was raised. Harlon was escorted to the first keep of Winterfell, recently restored to house honored guests and visiting bannermen, as he was told by Veon Poole, steward of Winterfell. But as he sat down in the chambers allocated for him, Harlon still did not change from his traveling armor of black boiled leathers and gold chainmail. Though he suspected that a great warrior like Eddard Stark would not give a damn. Not since he weren't a puny and pathetic mainlander like those of the south. Harlon respected the northerners the most of the mainland. For how constant wars with Ironborn, Sistermen, wildlings, Andal invaders and southerners had hardened them along with the cold and wintry climate. As he looked from the balcony of his chambers, Harlon smirked as he looked out of Winterfell, the Winter City, the Wolfswood and the Godswood. It's almost a wintry equivalent to Pike. The Starks can keep their strength in their snow and their faith in their trees. I find my strength in the sea and in the drowned god. Harlon turned from the balcony when he heard a knocking on the door. He walked to the door. Enter. A servant opened the door. "Milord, I am to escort you to Lord and Lady Stark," he said. Show me the way," Harlon replied. The servant escorted him to the solar of the Lord of Winterfell. Sat down in there was both the Stark of Winterfell and his beautiful lady wife. "Do sit down, Lord Harlon." Harlon did as he was invited to do so before facing the two. "So, Lord Harlon, how might we be of help to House Greyjoy and to the Iron Islands?" asked Ashura Stark. "You know of the trade posts I have built in the Riverlands and the Crown Lands, Lady Stark?" he asked. "We are," said the young wolf. "Then you will know how they benefit not only the local populations of where they are built, but also to my own people back home. Currently the only lawful fortunes a man can make in the Iron Islands is fishing and mining for iron. Which is why many still want to go back to the old way of raiding and reaving. My lord father and I wish to change that by building these trade posts. But we can only do so with consent from the ruling Lord Paramount. So, Lord Stark, I would ask for your consent for the Iron Islands to build these trade posts in the north. Eddard the young wolf pursed his lips before bringing a map of the north to the desk. Ideally, where would you and Lord Quarian want to build said trade posts, he asked. Harlon cleared his throat before pointing at the stony shore and at the coastal lands of White Harbor. Would this be possible, he asked. The Stark looked at his lady wife. Both shared a shrug and a nod. These terms are agreeable. If there was more, he asked. Aye, there was, replied the heir to the Iron Islands with a nod. Speak it then, he said with a gesture. Harlon cleared his throat once more before he spoke. I saw all the great improvements you have built in the north and what is being built in the Riverlands, and have heard that it takes place in the Vale and the Stormlands also. For the Iron Islands, to have these, would be a great achievement. Eddard Stark pursed his lips in thought. But Harlon's eyes darted to his lady wife. When her eyes opened wide as though she had thought up a brilliant idea. That would be agreeable, Lord Harlon. However, we have a condition to add to this also, she said. That being, though the Iron Islands has a lack in trees and wood, it is evident that you have the finest shipbuilders in your services. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for our allies. In recent years the North has been building a fleet. A merchant fleet and a war fleet. However, the Vale and the Stormlands do not. If provided with the wood, would the Iron Islands be willing to build 2 fleets for our allies? Whom would willingly pay in gold? And will surely allow for trade posts to be built in their own countries in gratitude. This journey to Winterfell keeps getting better and better. Thank the drowned god. Can you guarantee this, Lady Stark? I can, Lord Harlon, she replied with a smile. Harlon smirked at that. Then we have an understanding, he said. Ashura 14. Ashura beamed as she stared down at her. Their first daughter. Fast asleep in her cradle. She is so precious, she thought, annoyed that Maester Wallers forbid her from getting up. For she knew that she would have wasted no time in getting up and cradling her in her arms. So, Ashura resigned herself to lying down. Listening to her daughter breathe as she slept in her cradle. My beautiful girl. She looked up when she heard footsteps. She recognized them as Ned's footsteps. Ashura had learned to recognize his footsteps from the quick and long strides he would always seem to walk rather than walk at a short pace. Ned had told her it was from climbing up hills and mountains in the northern mountains and the mountains of the Vale and climbing up the Giant's Lance with Robert when they were 12. The door opened. And sure enough, it was Ned. Stood there, beaming down at her and at their daughter. He wasted no time in walking to her side and lying down in bed with her. Ashura sighed contentedly as Ned lay next to her. She wrapped her arms around him as he did the same and kissed her gently all over her face before kissing her lips. I love you so much, Ash. And I love you, my love, she said. No matter how many times he had said it, Ashura never tired of hearing those words. Never from Ned's own lips. For how he adored her. And how he loved her no matter what. Do you need me to get you anything, Ash? He asked gently. Ashura stroked his face whilst her own blushed at his words. Ned never seemed to be unable to make her blush from how he treated her as though she was the most precious and most important thing in his life. I am fine. I just need you here, she replied before kissing him happily on his lips. Are you sure? No water or food? He asked as he stroked her face. Just you, my Ned. Ned beamed before he leant in and captured her lips with his and they shared a long kiss. And how is our little Lyanna? Asked Ned. She is fast asleep, she replied. Ned glanced at her, asleep in her cradle. She has her mother's beauty, he said with a proud smile. What happened with Maester Wallers in your solar? She asked. Just to say that the Ironborn have begun to build their trade posts. And in the Vale, Jon is building 2 new castles, intending to award one to his nephew Sir Denys and the other to his sister's son, Sir Hubert Hardyne. And in the Stormlands, Robert has decided to build a trading hub for the north of the Stormlands. It is a city, which he has named Squall's Reach, which he will award to Stannis. Not just the north, but our steps to rebuild and restore and build new has been spread across all over Westeros. I am glad. It will build people new homes. It grants a second chance for the homeless peoples of these kingdoms, as well as a good chance for many to provide for their families. And it is all thanks to Rickard Stark. I wish I could have met him. I wish he could be here to see what his legacy is now doing for the Seven Kingdoms. But they are building the improvements that they had asked for, asked Ashura. They are. And making fast work of it too. Especially now, with all that is happening in the free cities, said Ned. Why? What is happening in the free cities? Asked Ashura. Thousands of runaway slaves, servants and homeless are fleeing the free cities, looking for a chance to work and provide for their families. This is certainly in the Riverlands, Stormlands and Vale, said Ned. Is that anything to do with the triarchy that all seem to be so nervous about? Especially Roriga and Aes. Thinking of the triarchy, it made Ashura nervous. It made her nervous when she thought of what Elia had written to her in letters. Of how both Aes and Roriga had become paranoid about the triarchy. And how the triarchy was a former enemy of House Targaryen, at the time of the Dance of Dragons. I have seen Ned go off to war once before. I do not ever want him to see him go to war. I know that he is a werewolf. But he is my husband. I love him so much. But I need him. And our growing family needs him. Notes. Harlon has now made a very good deal with Ned indeed, with the potential to build trading posts in not only the north, but in the Vale and the Stormlands, as well as make money through building war fleets and merchant fleets for them. And now Ned and Ashura have a daughter, called Lyanna. Chapter 91, A Chance to Prove Themselves. Summary. Robert hosts a feast in Storm's End to welcome the bannermen of the Stormlands. Whilst Vargid reluctantly spends time with his family. And Lucerys hopes to distract Roriga from Ned. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Robert the 12th. Robert didn't like seeing the Stormlords that considered obeying Connington's command more important than following direction from Storm's End. The command from Storm's End was to not intervene in the war. And yet, numerous houses had chosen to fight on Connington's command and for Aes the Mad. But Lyanna and Cresson said that this was important. For numerous reasons. First, it was important that the Stormlords meet Lady Baratheon of Storm's End. Second, to see that she was now heavy with child. Third, to hear his proclamations on the future of the Stormlands. And lastly, for them to see the Lord of Storm's End in person. If one useful aspect came from the war which is relevant to the Stormlands and to House Baratheon, it is that I now know who is naught but a lickspittle to that degenerated Askissa, Connington, and who is loyal to Storm's End and are true Stormlanders. Though with Connington as Hand of the King, I will ruin him. By bringing the improvements that Ned has offered to the Stormlands, I will improve this country tenfold, and Connington will have fewer and fewer friends and allies. Robert glared when he saw the banners of houses Connington, Fell, Caffin, Grandison, Lunmouth, Swigert, Hope, Trant and Musgood hung around the dining hall of the Round Hall. Fucking lickspittles. Traitors to House Baratheon. If I had it my way, they would not receive the benefits of Ned's grand projects. The bannermen all ate and drank well in the dining hall whilst troubadours played a jovial and merry tune. At the high table, Robert was sat with Lyanna, Stannis, Renly and Uncle Harbert. Robert glanced at Stannis and Uncle Harbert. Both nodded. Robert turned to Lyanna. She smiled as they held hands. Robert stood with Lyanna. Just as Lyanna gestured to the troubadours. They ceased their music, just as the bannermen all noticed Robert and Lyanna stand before them. All stood before their liege lord and his lady wife. My lords and ladies, Lady Lyanna and I would like to welcome you all to Storm's End and to thank you all for coming, Robert said with a smile. All applauded at his speech. Now, I would like to make it known of a trading alliance I have made on behalf of the Stormlands. This trading alliance has been made with House Stark of Winterfell, House Arryn of the Eyrie and House Tully of Riverrun. The benefits of this alliance shall see our trading income increase as well as a reduction in tolls to pay for use of the Kalin Canal. Many of the wealthier houses with lands on the coast looked very pleased at that. Most notably houses Swan, Tarth, Estermont, Dondarrion, Whitehead, Wild and Connington. Not that Robert wanted House Connington to benefit from this trade alliance or from Ned's projects. But there is more. For Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, has completed numerous projects in the north, which he now offers to the Stormlands. I have accepted these projects that will ultimately benefit the Stormlands in ways we have not seen before, he announced. What do these projects entail, Lord Baratheon? Asked Ralph Buckler. Those the architectural wonders that you would read of in the books of Lomas Longstrider. Such as the aqueducts of Bravos, which are capable of delivering water from rivers to even the most isolated of places. As well as Valyrian roads. Thrice as wide as dirt roads and are reinforced with oil and stone, making the roads stronger and smoother. All of which would prevent congestion on roads, ensure swifter progress across the Stormlands, and the wheels of wagons and wheelhouses are less likely to break. The bannermen of the Stormlands all looked very impressed with what he was saying. And lastly, I would make it known that I am building a new city in the Stormlands, in the north. Just north of Parchments and positioned at the border between the Crownlands and the Stormlands and the border between the Straits of Tarth and the Narrow Sea. It is my intent for this new city, which I have named Squall's Reach, to act as a new trade city for the Stormlands. And upon its completion, I would award it to my brother, Lord Stannis, Robert announced. With all this good news, Robert was pleased at how they all clapped and cheered. Even John Connington's cousin, Sir Ronald, was clapping and raising his cup to him. But, my lords and ladies, I have already spoken aplenty. You came here to feast and get drunk, and so you shall. Robert announced with a wide grin. There was cheering and laughter before the troubadours began to play once again. Robert and Lyanna sat back down. How did that go? He asked. She beamed as she nodded. It was fine. And with this, very few Stormlords will ever go against your House Baratheon, she said. That's the idea. Though it will be strange. Once Squall's Reach is completed and Stannis becomes its lord. Storm's End will be far cheerier and less dull and dour. Especially when Lyanna gives birth to our first child. Vargid 12. Vargid felt little when he saw his son playing with his toys in the nursery. Despite being a father to a healthy and fast-growing son, called Tyronos, he still did not care for being a father or being a husband. Vargid only ever cared for killing and fighting. And being paid for such deeds. That hadn't changed since wedding Valerie's daughter and becoming Gonfalonier of Lies. And since Valerie's came to power in Lies, he was now one of the most powerful men in the Triarchy. From such a position of power, Vargid hoped to fight. He had fought against the Dothraki a year ago. He had won a great victory. He enjoyed slaughtering the Dothraki that day, and he enjoyed the glory of battle and the thrill of another victory. Whilst Valerie's cared for turning his ward into a battle-hardened killer and to further the power of the Triarchy. Will you teach him how to fight? Vargid turned to his wife. Delaera beamed at their son with a mother's love for her child. Well, at least he won't have a parent who is aloof for his entire childhood. That being said, he will need to learn such lessons as he grows up. When I was twice his age, I saw my own father get murdered. I learned from that day to never be weak. That is why, when I was your age, I took a rusted sword and spilled the blood of 10 men before someone gave me his name. I didn't take his head for taking my father from me. I killed him to prove a point. To show the world what happens when one makes an attack on me. To let all Volantis know what will become of them when one makes me their enemy. Vargid turned to Delaera. I will teach him. He'll have to learn from me if he shall be a warrior for the Triarchy under his grandfather's rule, Vargid replied with a forced smile. No son of mine will be a weakling. My sons will become ruthless killers and know that vengeful enemies only exist when you show mercy. Exo. Vargid turned to one of the slaves serving he and Delaera since they had moved to the Gonfaloniers' estate, an estate in central Lies, where the serving Gonfalonier and his family reside during his term in office. An office Vargid had no intention of relinquishing. Not if it meant fighting wars. Yes, asked Vargid impatiently, eager to get away from this forced family time. The First Magister summons you to his manse, he said. Very well. I'll be there, said Vargid. He planted a gentle kiss on Delaera's lips before turning to Tyronos. He saw Tyronos knocking over several toys with a small wooden sword. Good lad. Maybe you truly are my son. Vargid left hastily for the Daltala manse. Upon his arrival, he could see his wheelhouse was being repainted and freshened up. It would need to be after the journey to Norphos, Vargid thought as he remembered how Valeries had recently returned from making a journey to Norphos, to meet with the theocrat of Norphos. Bacchiatos allowed him into Valeries' solar. How was it in Norphos? Vargid asked. A place of faith, I found. Despite the city's youth trying to avoid the religious rules enforced upon them and trying to flout them, he explained as he finished putting quill to parchment and folded it into an envelope. Vargid smirked. Perhaps fighting in a war alongside their city's good friend, the Triarchy, will harden those young boys and turn them into warriors and into men of faith that their theocrat and bearded priests will be proud of. Vargid suggested. Precisely my thinking, Valeries replied before he sealed a letter. Now, should war come soon, we cannot be caught unawares. We must be prepared for war. I want the city's defenses strengthened with all the most modern of capabilities. Not to fend off against the pirates of the Stepstones or the pirates of Oldgis. I want the city to have the maximum defenses that any enemy would find it near impossible to take the city without suffering enormous casualties, Valeries said. What are the chances of that? Asked Vargid as he sat down opposite him. According to my spies in King's Landing, they grow by the day. I have learned that like his own father, Rhaegar Targaryen grows paranoid with the growing power of the Triarchy. And he fears his own subjects for building Valyrian and other such foreign improvements to their own lands. Subjects such as our acquaintances, the Starks. And what of our armies and the fleets? Asked Vargid. How many men do we have in our army? Valeries enquired. 20,000 men. More than half of whom are veterans from fighting the Dothraki for Volantis. As for the rest, I have given commands to have them deal with nests of bandits and small Dothraki bands across the Triarchy. To harden them for war? Asked Valeries. Yes. Did I do wrong? No, you did not. It is a good solution. But it is not enough. We need more men. Thousands more. Now, what of our fleets? He asked. I spoke with High Admiral Rugaria. He says that we currently have a war fleet of 40 ships. The merchant ships bringing golden heartwood from the Summer Isles and ironwood from the north are coming in fast supply. But we will need to buy more slaves to build the ships and more slaves to forge weapons and armor and fletch arrows. Valeries nodded at that. Well, we shall have to remedy that. I will write to my counterparts in Slavers Bay. Doubtless they will have some good stock to sell to us. They never seem to have a lack in slaves to sell to us, he commented before he took another parchment and dipped his quill in its ink pot. How many slaves do you think? As many as we can get. For the forges, foundries, smithies, shipyards and harbors in Lies and on our lands in the mainland, Vargid replied. Lucerys X. Lucerys felt worried when he saw the king enter the small council alongside the queen and alongside Rolla. He hoped that he would cease in his paranoia concerning the Starks and the North. He hoped that he would focus more on the direst of problems facing the entire realm than in his petty disputes with Eddard Stark. I have seen men, women and children react the same way in which the king acts when there is mention of Eddard Stark and the North. Only when said men, women and children are either envious, fearful or both. I would think that he feels both regarding the young wolf who has a hardened grip on the realm's throat. I can only hope that this news will strike him as important and divert his attention to what truly matters. I cannot remain in service to a king who inherits the ill traits of House Targaryen. I have done that for Aes. But I cannot do the same for Rhaegar. My lords. Let us begin, said the king. Lucerys turned to the hand of the king, who gestured with his hands in such a way that he was going to speak first. First of all, His Grace and I have decreed to form a new position to the small council. The Master of Farms, charged with the production of food across the realm and to ensure that none of His Grace's subjects will ever grow hungry. A fine idea. But who will take such a position? It would best be a Reachman. Their country is the bread biscuit of the realm. Mace Tyrell is a man eager for power and position. But as Lord of Highgarden and Lord Paramount of the Reach, he would be the best option. That is if he didn't have his ridiculing and prickly mother at his side. It is no secret that the Tyrells want to marry into House Targaryen. They should be content that two of their own are lords with their own holdings. A fine idea, my king, my lord hand. But whom shall fill this position? Asked Lucerys. At that, The king frowned. Whereas Conington cleared his throat anxiously. The king and queen have decided for Sir Baylor Hightower to fill said position, Lord Valerian, said Conington. Is the king still annoyed at how he lost the Harrenhal Tony to the heir to Old Town? It is a rather boyish thing to be so jealous to a man such as he. Well, in King's Landing of all places, he has little chance of trying to seduce the queen if he does try anything. Not without the spider finding out. An urgent matter has been brought to our attention, your grace, said Varys. Regarding what? Asked the king. The pirates of the Stepstones and the sea raiders of the Three Sisters, he replied. I hope that this distracts him from the Starks. Have either committed any devastating atrocities? Fearfully asked the queen. They have, my queen. The pirates of the Stepstones have begun to ransack coastal Dornish villages and even attempted to raid the Planky town. And as for the Sisterman sea raiders, they have attacked the keep of Titan's Tower in the Vale and murdered Lord Petter Baelish and taken his home for their own. What stops Prince Doran and Lord Arryn from dealing the king's justice on them? Asked Conington. Varys cleared his throat before he replied. In Dorne, they possess no war fleet to sail an army to the Stepstones, Lord Hand, whereas the pirates have over 60 ships and over 6,000 men. And regarding the sea raiders, they number over 5,000 men and answer to foreign slavers from Slavers Bay. And the Vale armies are being tied down trying to fight off the hill tribes who have begun to rise in rebellion against House Arryn. The king frowned at the news. Both his queen and his mother looked distraught at the activities of these criminals. Through such horrific circumstances, comes an opportunity for one house to prove itself. Perhaps an entire nation. A nation with a fleet and with fighting men. Concerning these matters, my king, I have a solution, said Lucerys. You do, Lucerys? Asked Ruller. Indeed, your grace. It is no secret that Quavian Greyjoy seeks to civilize his people and build trading posts in various kingdoms to provide for his people. This may be the chance for the Iron Islands to prove their loyalty. By having the Iron Fleet deal with the Stepstones pirates and the Sisterman sea raiders, asked the king. Indeed, your grace. Though the Iron Fleet have a history of scavenging and stealing what they are too lazy to grow or build for themselves, I think that this is an opportune chance for Quavian Greyjoy to prove his loyalty to the Iron Throne, he explained. The king pursed his lips in consideration. At last he nodded. Do it, Lord Valerian. Send word to Quavian Greyjoy to dispatch the Iron Fleet and deal with both problems post asked. I shall, my king. Notes. Robert and Lyanna have now met the Stormlords face to face and told them of what they hope to achieve in their trade alliance with Ned. Valorys now rides to Slavers Bay to purchase thousands more slaves for production of weapons, armaments and ships. And Rhaegar agrees to give the Greyjoys a chance to prove that they are committed to bringing civilization to their country. Chapter 92, A Chance to Do Good. Summary. The Greyjoys receive an offer from the king. And in Riverrun, Hoster hosts a third wedding. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Harlon 9. Harlon rode with Alanis, Asher and Theon across Pike. As he looked around, Harlon smiled when he saw the progress made by the northern builders. They had already finished widening the existing dirt road from Pike to Lordsport and to Ironholt. And now they were placing burnt and crushed rock onto the road, for artisans of Essos to pour their oil on and solidify it. As well as building these Valyrian roads in the Iron Islands, a representative of the Volanten Guild of Crafters offered the construction of podders, capable of reclaiming land from the sea for islands. But also reclaiming lands deep under the water by using water magic of the warlocks of Len. At the chance of gaining more land without the use of mainlander small folk, Father eagerly accepted and paid for their services with the wealth made from the trade posts. Why do they build these roads, Father? Asked Theon. Harlon smiled as he turned to his son. They build them to make it easier to travel, Theon, lad. It will also make it easier for merchants to deliver their goods overland, Harlon explained. Harlon turned his eye to the west, where the podders had already claimed vast tracts of rocky terrain and barren lands. But the ground was low enough to build villages, harbors and Harlon thought, perhaps even a castle. Father can award castles to my brothers. Or worthy captains of the Iron Fleet. Harlon. Brother. Harlon turned around. He saw Robin riding towards them. Robin, calm yourself, lad, Harlon said as he came toward them. "Aye. Brother, father summons you. All of us to his solar," he said. Harlon turned his eyes to Pike. "Right. Let's not keep him waiting." With Robin, they rode back to Pike. Harlon and Robin joined Donnell, Quentin, Victorian, Aragon and Aaron at the bridge to the sea tower. What could this be about? Aragon wondered. Hope he has a foe for us to fight. I want to kill and pay the iron price for plunder and glory, Victorian boomed. We all do, little brother, said Quentin. I'm fucking tired of these foreign builders building here. What our ancestors have lived with for centuries and millennia before is good enough for us, said Victorian. And yet, the drowned god has given us this chance to better our lives and the future of the Iron Islands and the Ironborn. If this strengthens the Iron Islands, then the storm god has no power over us, said Aaron. Well said, little brother, added Donnell before they came to Father's solar. The guards opened the door. Harlon was the first to enter, followed by Donnell, Victorian, Quentin, Robin, Aaron and Aragon. What is this about? The northern builders have been here for almost 2 moons now. They should have gotten headway on their improvements. What's this all about then, father? Asked Harlon whilst Donnell sat down first, putting his feet on father's desk. Get your filthy fucking feet off my desk before I make you walk around Pike barefoot, father snapped. Donnell shrugged and moved his feet off. At which Robin smirked at the remand. I'll send you flying across the training yard for that, little brother, Donnell teased. Shut your fucking mouths, all of you. A letter has come to us, from the Red Keep, said father. From the Red Keep? What about? Has one of our captains gone rogue? What do they say, father? Asked Aragon. They have 2 directives for us. They want us to do what the Iron Fleet does best, he said. Those words put a smile on all of his sons. Victorian was chuckling at that. Finally, some fun, he remarked. Aye, a chance for slaughter, plunder and paying the iron price, said Aaron, whom was now captain of his own ship, which he had named the Golden Storm. We are supposed to be uplifting ourselves from that tradition, father pointed out. That alone remains in our culture, father. For what is earned by the iron price is won in honorable battle and earned fairly. It cannot be mistake for a thief's spoils, when they steal in the dead of night and without earning said plunder, Quentin pointed out. Father grunted at Quentin's point. Though Harlon agreed with Quentin. For all the armor he wore, he had earned it all from paying the iron price. The armor he wore on dry land and when meeting men was given to him when he was made captain of his own ship at 13. The armor he wore in battle, he had claimed from across the world. He had taken the chainmail from a Kohuric sellsword he had slain in the disputed lands. The cuirass he had claimed from killing Sir Garth Strickland, Captain General of the Golden Company, which he had painted black and with a golden kraken engraved in the center by Dalton Ironhammer, the castle blacksmith of Pike. But it was his helmet which was his favorite. It was a Yitish helm, worn by generals in the Yitish army. One in which he had claimed from killing a Yitish pirate lord who had set up a fleet in Oldkis. It was a lamella helm painted black and gold, and with golden wings outstretched, like a phoenix's wings. Harlon liked it for its exotic design and how comfortable and easy to wear it was in comparison to helms forged on the mainland. Our good friend, Lucius Valerian, has persuaded the king to let us be the ones to deal with 2 persistent thorns up the king's royal arse. And they are, asked Donnell. The pirates of the Stepstones. And the sea raiders of the 3 Sisters. The latter has recently taken a lord's castle in the Vale and killed the lord. As for the Stepstones, the king wants all the pirates wiped out and for the Dornish to take the Stepstones for themselves. Lord Valerian says that whatever plunder is to be found in both the Stepstones and Titan's Tower, is ours. Harlon, you are in command of the Iron Fleet. You will lead the Iron Fleet and wipe them all out. Aye, father. Caitlin ate. Caitlin frowned as she stretched her arms out, its sleeves reaching down to her wrist. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she felt disheartened as she saw it. The wedding dress that had arrived a day before they had heard the terrible news of Bran and Rickard Stark. The dress that she should have worn when she wedded him. But now the day had come. For her to wed Jaime Lannister. He was very handsome. In a different way to Bran. Bran was roguishly handsome and daring. And yet, he had soft grey eyes that made Caitlin feel safe when she looked in those eyes. His arms were so muscular and strong. And when they danced together and kissed in Harrenhal, Caitlin felt so content and so happy. Whereas Jamie was different. He was dashingly handsome and gentle. He was kind and considerate to her in their times they had gone courting together. And yet, at times, he seemed so reserved and looked so frightened. As though he was living in night terrors. Caitlin looked at herself in the mirror once again. Until she heard a knock on the door. "Cat. Is everything all right?" Caitlin nodded, though he couldn't see her. "Yes, Father," she replied. Father opened the door and beamed when he saw her. "Gods, Cat. You are a vision. You are the image of your mother," said Father. Caitlin smiled weakly as she turned to face him. "Cat, what is it?" he asked, his voice soft and laced with concern and worry. "I am scared, Father. Scared of being wed. And to a man I have known only for such a short time," she explained. Father smiled sadly before he walked to her side and hugged her. "Everything will be all right, my cat. I promise," he whispered. "Thank you, Father," she whispered in reply. As he broke from the hug, he faced her with a gentle smile. "Now, there is something I wanted to give to you," he said. He reached for his pocket and drew a ring out. Caitlin gasped as she saw the ring. For she recognized it immediately. Mother's ring. A gold ring with an image of a silver tully trout engraved on the band itself, both on the inside and the outside. And on the top, was engraved gemstones. Sapphires, rubies and diamonds, positioned in such a way to form a tully trout and with the red and blue surrounding the diamonds. "Father, it is Mother's wedding ring," she said. "It is. But, I know that she would have wanted you to have it, my cat," he replied before he took her hand and placed the ring on the palm of her hand. Caitlin inhaled and exhaled gently before she put the ring on her left ring finger. He patted her shoulder before he held her hand. "Come now. We mustn't be late," he said gently before affectionately kissing her cheek. Caitlin nodded as she held Father's hand and walked with him from the Great Hall and to the September. She smiled at seeing the banners of House Lannister and House Tully, stood together around the September and the Great Hall. Ever since Father and Uncle Brynden had told her of the match, which Uncle Brynden and Tywin Lannister had negotiated, Caitlin had spent days and weeks reading of House Lannister and the Westerlands. She was certainly glad that the faith of the Seven was dominant in the Westerlands and not the old gods like the North was. They reached the September. The doors were opened. Caitlin smiled as they walked up the aisle. Passing by her friends and family and Father's bannermen on the right, whilst the left were the friends and family of Jaime and bannermen of the Westerlands. Caitlin was glad that Lysa and Elbereth had both come for the wedding. She saw the two stood at the front with Edmure and Uncle Brynden. And were now joined by Father when he took his place with them. Caitlin walked towards the altar and held hands with Jaime whilst Septon Trenton began the ceremony. "You may now cloak the bride under your protection." Jaime reached up for Caitlin's tully-embroidered cloak and exhaled gently as he unfastened it. She noticed how he flushed as he did so. But then she noticed how his eyes often darted in the direction of his own sister, the Lady Cersei. Why does he look to her? Jaime passed her cloak to Lysa, stood nearby, whom was smiling joyfully at her. Jaime then removed his own cloak from his shoulders. He gulped as he leant forwards and placed the cloak around Caitlin's shoulders. He exhaled gently as he stood straightly. "Is he as shy as I am?" Septon Trenton tied a ribbon around their holding hands. "Let it be known that Jaime Lannister and Caitlin Tully are one heart, one flesh, one soul. Cursed be who would seek to tear them asunder." Caitlin and Jaime shared a nervous and shy smile as he unravelled the ribbon. The Septon of Riverrun had placed the ribbon aside, passing it to one of his acolytes as both Jaime and Caitlin turned to face Septon Trenton. He held his arms out for all to see as he faced the two sides of the aisle. "In the sight of the Seven, I hereby seal these two souls, binding them as one for eternity," he said before facing the bride and groom. "Now look upon each other and say the words." They faced each other to say the words. "Father, Smith, warrior, mother, maiden, crone, stranger," said the bride and the groom. "I am hers and she is mine. From this day until the end of my days. I am his and he is mine. From this day until the end of my days," Caitlin said clearly, though nervously. Now, after a quick glance in the direction of both his sister and then his dwarf brother, Jaime turned to face all of those gathered. With this kiss, I pledge my love. At that, he turned to face Caitlin. He gently leant in and softly kissed her lips. Notes. The Greyjoys are excited at the offer from Rhaegar and for battle and plunder. And now Jaime and Caitlin are married. Which means he'll have to get over Cersei. Chapter 93, Duty Calls. Summary. Donal Noye forges a new suit of armor for Robert, just in time for an upcoming battle. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Lyanna 11. Lyanna smiled as Robert pulled out a chair for her. Thank you, Robert, she said. Robert beamed affectionately before he sat down with her in his solar. It is the least I can do, Robert replied as he held her hands before kissing both of her hands. Ever since Maester Cresson had announced the news of her gestation, Robert had taken all steps to ensure that she had what she needed and had comfort in the Round Hall. He had assigned a few experienced wet nurses and midwives to her, who told her of what to expect and what to do, as well as the foods and drinks she was to avoid. The foremost of which included alcohol. There was a knock on the door. Enter, said Robert, still smiling as he held Lyanna's hands. Lyanna turned as the door opened. It was Robert's uncle Harbert. He smirked at the two as he saw them hold hands. Robert, I have news from Donal. He has completed your order. Eagerly, Robert stood up at the news, still holding Lyanna's hands. Would you want to come, my love? He asked. I would love to. And see what great armor my husband will take into battle, she said as she stood up and still held his hand. Since their wedding in Riverrun, Robert had commissioned the castle blacksmith of Storm's End to forge a great and worthy suit of armor for him. It had taken him 7 moons. But now he had completed it. Just as reports had been coming from houses Wild and Mertins of large groups of bandits raiding and pillaging. The three left the round hall and went down to the courtyard. There, they saw Donal Noye place a large helm on a mannequin, already wearing an extensive suit of armor. The boots, greaves, bracers, gauntlets, cuirass, pauldrons and gorget. As they came closer, Donal placed the helm on the mannequin's head. Donal saw them approach. He grinned as he and his 2 apprentices lifted the large mannequin and turned it to face them. Lyanna raised both brows as she admired the armor. It was a magnificent suit of armor. Whilst the cuirass was painted black, the rest was the same dark grey color. And on the cuirass, was an engraved yellow image of a leaping stag. Then there was the helm, a foreboding one. It was a great helm and with stag antlers protruding from it. Magnificent. It is magnificent. You have done very fine work, Donal, Robert complimented with an admiring smile. My finest work yet, Robert. All that we need now is for you to try it on, he said. Needing no further prodding, Robert stepped next to the armor. His good squire, Artyom, and Donal's 2 apprentices helped him don a chainmail shirt and trousers before he put his boots on. They placed his greaves, gauntlets and cuirass on. Before they added the pauldrons and gorget. And finally, they placed a cloth coif on Robert's head before they placed his great helm on his head. At last, Robert stood before them. Dressed in his finely crafted armor. Lyanna smiled as she gazed at her husband stood before her. Stretching his arms out and taking up a practice shield and a newly made sword of Donal's, Robert practiced sparring in his armor. He showed nor made no sign of exhaustion as he wielded both sword and shield in equal measure. It is amazing, Lyanna commented. Robert turned to face her. Though she couldn't see his face, she could almost sense he was blushing at her compliment. Robert. Brother. They all turned around to see Stannis. Stannis was running towards them, holding a letter in his hand. Robert removed his helm and put the shield and sword to one side as he faced Stannis. Robert. Sir Davos has done what was required. He has gathered a small fleet of ships. They are here now, he said. Robert nodded at that before he turned to Harbert. You know what you must do, uncle. I do. Robert. Have no fear. You must do what is right for the Stormlands and your people. Dutifully, Robert before he turned to Stannis. Gather 50 of our best knights and fighting men. Have them assembled at the gate as soon as possible. Then we will march for Eleni's beach, Robert commanded. Stannis, just as dutifully, bowed his head before he swiftly took his leave. Robert walked to Lyanna's side. I am so sorry, my love, he said as he held her hands with his hard and cold steel gauntlets. You have no need to apologize. As Harbert said, it is your duty to your people and the Stormlands. And will show your bannermen that you will never tolerate any such criminals in this country. They will see your strength. Even John Connington will see it. Robert smirked at the mention of his bitter rival. They left for the Round Horse stable. Artyom took his hammer and passed it to him before he brought Robert's beloved horse to him. Stormmane, a mighty and proud stallion, one whom Petal had befriended, Lyanna had noticed when she and Robert had gone horse riding together. Renly had gone to Stannis' side. For now, at 9 and soon to turn 10, he was still learning to fight and one day to be a squire. Both Robert and Stannis were leading the force of Storm's End's knights and soldiers for the awaiting ships of Davos, who had now taken the name Sir Davos Seaworth, Knight of Gusthold. And together, they would sail for Gusthold and join with a combined force of knights and soldiers of houses Seaworth, Mertyn and Wild, for it was their lands which were affected by the attacks from the Rainwood bandits. Robert climbed atop of Stormmane. He patted his neck proudly. Off to battle once more, old friend, he muttered to his beloved stallion. Lyanna smiled as she walked beside Robert. May the gods watch over you, Robert, she said as they briefly held hands. I will be careful, I promise. And I will come back to you, he replied before he looked down at her protruding belly with a beaming smile. I know you will. Just make your children proud of their father, she said. That I will, he said eagerly. Notes. Robert now leaves for Cape Wrath to track down and destroy a force of bandits. Chapter 94, A Plague of Bandits. Summary. Robert leads a small force to find the Rainwood bandits. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Robert the 13th. At Gales Point, a small peninsula on Cape Wrath in which House Seaworth now lived, Robert and his small fleet weighed anchor and made landfall. Are they here, Davos? Asked Robert. They are, my lord. They'll be in the keep now, I hope not making my Maria feel uncomfortable or unwelcome in her own home, he replied. Robert glared at that. Have they made insult to you, to your lady wife or to your sons? He demanded. Robert would hear of no insult from any to the Seaworths. Not after what Davos did to protect and sail Lyanna to safety in Storm's End. Or when he, one of the most notorious criminals in the Seven Kingdoms, could have handed her to Aes the Mad for coin and a pardon. Not to my face, my lord. But I see it in their eyes. They have no wish to break bread with the son of a crabber and treat said crabber's son as one of their own, he replied earnestly. Robert patted him on the shoulder with a smile. Davos, my friend, you are helping act against these bandits. Which is more than can be said of most noble houses of the Stormlands. And in my own experience, a victory in which you take part, does a lot to earn respect. Davos nodded at that with a weak smile before they walked onto the quay. House Seaworth's lands were small, with 2 villages answering to Gusthold and a small fishing village with a small harbour making up for its lands and the small folk who served Davos and his family. As well as the Oysterford trade post, a newly built trading post of the Iron Islands which Davos had permitted for them to build on his lands. His was the only house of the Stormlands which had permitted for House Greyjoy to build a trade post on their lands. Robert suspected that Davos intended to work with the Iron Islands merchants and build a fortune and a shipping empire with them as well as build his own merchant fleet. The keep itself was a small castle, with a small stone wall surrounding it, the height of which was only a head higher than Robert when he was sat on Stormmane. And the keep was of 4 small spiral towers at each corner of the keep. And the courtyard was small compared to that of Storm's End, with a stable and smithy on opposite ends of it. And 3 companies of men were assembled outside of the walls. Fighting men under the banners of proud houses Mertyns and Wild. And under the banner of House Seaworth, a small group of fighting men. Some were sailors under Davos' command and others were made up of young men of Seaworth lands. Robert and Stannis arrived at the keep. Entering the small feasting hall, Robert saw Caspar Wild and Boros Mertyns. They looked around the hall with disdain. Until they saw Robert and Stannis. Both rose from their seats and bowed their heads to him. "My lord Baratheon," they said. "I am glad of your arrivals, my lords. How many men do you bring?" "I lead 50 of Mistwood's finest knights and soldiers," my lord, said Boros Mertens. "And I bring another 50 of the best fighting men of Rain House, Lord Baratheon," said Caspar Wilde. "Excellent. Then, tonight, we shall take Sir Davos' ships and sail for Grey Rock Bay. From there, our combined forces will march and strike at the bandits." The two bannermen grimaced at the mention of Davos, and seeing him stood between both Robert and Stannis. "Of course, my lord," said the Lord of Rain House with a pained and forced smile. They left Gustkeep and led their combined companies to the ships of House Seaworth. With surrounding trees on his lands of the Rainwood, Davos had built a small fleet of ships using white oak and timber. He had built 6 ships and had given command of 2 ships to his 2 eldest sons, Dale and Allard. The other 4 had been given to sailors whom Davos had sailed with for years. After loading men, horses and supplies aboard the ships, the knights and warriors were sailed from Gustkeep to Grey Rock Bay. Robert hated sailing. He was forever reminded of hearing the news of mother and father every time he heard the waves crash against the hull. He would close his eyes shut and fasten his hands over the nearest railing as he prayed for the voyage to come to a swift end, hoping that the next crashing of the waves or the next splashing of oars was the last. "It must be done," Robert reminded himself. "The Stormlands is counting on me to rid Cape Wrath of these bandits." Robert exhaled and panted as he heard shouting of commands from Davos. "Weigh anchor. Get us closer to the coastline. Bring the dinghies and longboats about," he commanded. Robert slowly began to calm as he stood up and finally left Davos' cabin. He saw the boats and dinghies were first bringing the knights, their squires and their horses to shore. Robert was next with Stannis, Davos, Artyom and Stannis' own squire, Matho Seaworth, Davos' third son. In 2 hours, all men were disembarked from the Seaworth fleet. Robert rode at the head of the gathered force, wielding his hammer and riding atop of Storm Main. Using the information provided by Davos' spies, they marched further inland, until they reached a large open ground area of soil, tree stumps and rocks. There was even a cavern which was obscured by a nearby waterfall, feeding water into a large and clear pond. Robert stood by a tree overlooking the waterfall with Stannis, Davos, Wilde and Mertens beside him. "Is this it, Lord Davos?" asked Stannis. "It is, Lord Stannis. My informants say that once a week, the bandits assemble outside and begin to head out to their next target." "Is this informant reliable?" asked Wilde with an insulting tone of voice. "He is. He's a former member of the group. And he awaits his fate in Gustkeep once this is over," Lord Wilde Davos replied diplomatically. "And tonight, is such a night?" Robert asked. "It is, Lord Baratheon. The former bandit also said that they number over 100 men. But that was when I had caught him." "When was that?" asked Stannis. 2 moons ago. And new information suggests that their numbers swell with men and boys wanting to break faith with their lords and turn to a life of crime," Davos explained. Robert frowned as he heard the snorts of Wilde and Mertens both. He was about to turn and confront them as both his armored hands curled into fists. But then he heard commotion. "Can you hear that?" he asked. They paused to listen. "It's coming from the waterfall, my lord," said Mertens. He was right, Robert noticed. For soon dozens of bandits began to assemble, running through the waterfall and onto the rocky grounds before the waterfall. All were dressed in leathers and poorly made clothes. They were armed with few steel weapons, bows, spears and even farming equipment. "Gather the men. Have them assemble in the trees here. We attack as soon as they make ready to move out." "Why not move now, my lord?" asked Wilde. "Because I want to kill them all when they are fully assembled, and out here in the open. In these caverns, they would trap us and fight without honor. Whereas out here, we have the full advantage." They gathered their men, as Robert stayed to watch. He saw that Davos' informant was speaking the truth. There was at least 200 of them. And Robert soon spotted whom the leaders were. He counted 7 of them. He could tell that they were the leaders of these bandits easily enough. For they were dressed in chainmail and leathers. And their weapons were swords, axes and shields. Robert snarled when he saw the entire bandit force assembled, just as they began cheering at speeches made by their leaders. Fucking bandit scum. There'll be no fucking criminal scum in the Stormlands whilst I am Lord of Storm's End. If there is one thing I truly hate, it is a fucking thief who takes what isn't his. Whether it's another man's gold, his home, his inheritance or even his loved ones. The men are ready, Robert Stannis whispered as he unsheathed his sword. On my command, Robert said as he climbed back onto Stormmain. He joined the other men on horseback and lifted high his great hammer, eager to spill the blood of those who threatened the lives of his subjects. Charge! Robert was the first to ride into the fray. He saw how the bandits all turned to see them in shock. At how armored and mounted knights and armored infantry charged upon them, shouting the war cries of houses Baratheon, Mertins, Seaworth and Wild. Stormmain charged straight into 3 shocked bandits standing together. The 3 were knocked down and trampled by the hooves of other horses. Robert's enormous hammer swung down onto the unprotected head of a bandit armed with a makeshift spear. The man's head was non-existent as Robert ripped his hammer away. Robert swung across at the nearest bandits. He struck down 4 with a single blow of his hammer. Robert saw the 7 leaders drawing steel and fighting back. One was swiftly cut down by Stannis whilst another was lanced by a knight of Mistwood. Robert rode towards them with fury. You bandit bastards! 7 hells take you all, he roared before he smashed his hammer down onto one's head before he ripped it away and swung it across, killing an additional 2. Before the remaining 4 were swiftly killed by soldiers of House Seaworth. Robert panted as he looked around. The battle was over. The bandits were slaughtered. He nodded, glad that it was an easy victory and that they appeared to have suffered little, if any, casualties. Take what you want from the dead, men. Robert roared before he climbed down from Stormmain. Knights, with me. Where to, brother? Asked Stannis. The caverns they called home, Robert replied. But as they entered the caves, they found no signs of life. No bandits remaining. But many piles of loot lying around. Gold, silver, jewelry, gemstones, amber, pottery and thick fur pelts. Again, Robert allowed the men to take their pick of the loot as he ordered Davos to prepare the ships for the return voyage to Gustkeep and then to Storm's End. Notes. By destroying this force of bandits, Robert now earns renown as a highly skilled warrior and commander. Chapter 95, A New Position in the Small Council. Summary. Good news comes for House Arryn. Baela's first day in the Small Council. And poor Elia feels starved of affection and romance. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Elbereth 13. Elbereth nervously walked with Lysa to Maester Coleman's solar. During their breakfast that morning, Lysa had appeared to be unwell. She had turned pale in color. And then she had needed to run for the privy. At Elbereth's insistence, they had left for the solar of the Maester of the Uri. It had been 3 weeks since their return home from attending the wedding of Elbereth's good sister Catelyn and her now husband, Jaime Lannister. During the wedding, Elbereth found it strange looking at the Lannisters. When only several moons ago, they were his enemy in the war. During the fighting at Spring Falls, he had slain Sir Lorand Lorque as well as numerous other knights and soldiers of the Westerlands. As had Sir Brynden, who looked around at the Westerlands nobility with a hint of amusement at this turn of events. At Maester Coleman's solar, Elbereth saw the man writing a letter. Maester, he called. He looked up from his letter. He saw Lysa's paled face. My lady, what seems to be the problem? He put down his quill and parchment and walked to her side. He bid her to sit down whilst Elbereth sat down. I was fine earlier, until I started to eat some breakfast. All of which just tasted foul. And then I started to feel sick, she explained. Maester Coleman hummed at that before he walked back to his desk and took a book. Elbereth. Elbereth turned to the door at hearing Uncle John's voice. I must see what this about. I'll be back, Elbereth said as he held Lysa's hand before he leant in and kissed her cheek and rubbed her shoulder affectionately. She smiled in reply before Elbereth walked outside to find Uncle John. Uncle? Elbereth asked aloud. Ah, there you are, said Uncle John, stood by the staircase. How is Lysa? He asked. Better, now that she is with Maester Coleman, Elbereth replied. Good. Now, I must speak with you. On what, uncle? He asked. You recall the new castle soon to be built? I do. What of them? He asked. They are nearing completion. Well, the keeps at the very least. And I reached an agreement with the Greyjoys. In exchange for a fleet of 20 warships, they will be permitted to build their trade posts on the lands of these new castles as well as Yohn's lands. Though the Graftons were furious at the notion of Ironborn having a presence in their lands. Many are, uncle. After thousands of years of raiding, reading and harrying the coastlines of the entirety of Westeros. Even if Quarian Greyjoy's desires for reform and change in the Iron Islands are genuine, it won't erase all the history of what the Ironborn inflicted upon Westeros, Elbereth explained. True, but those trade posts are of significant value and shall be of good use to the Seven Kingdoms in the future, of this I am certain, said Uncle John. What of the improvements Ned has offered the Vale? Elbereth asked. Like with the castles, the foundations have been laid. The roads have been widened across the Vale. All it needs now is the oil and rock. But it will be easier once the hill tribes have been dealt with once and for all. As well as those damned System and Sea Raiders. No Baelishs of Titan's Tower live after their killing of Peter Baelish. Uncle, what shall become of the lands once they are liberated? Asked Elbereth. They can be developed. From a pitiful tower and village and into a larger castle and a port with good access to the sea and the free cities. And in the end, it can be awarded to a second son you and Lysa may have. Lysa. I should see her. Maester Coleman may have news on what condition ails her so. She doesn't deserve to be so unwell. Uncle, I should return to Lysa, he said. Of course. You go to your wife. And let me know how she is when you have news. In my solar. In the meantime, I must tell your cousin Denise of the good news. Elbereth took his leave and returned to Maester Coleman's solar. Elbereth swiftly returned to his wife and to the Maester. Only to see Maester Coleman smiling at Lysa. And seeing her so happy. What is this? Could she be? What is it, Maester? What news? He asked. They turned to him. My congratulations to you, my lord. For 7 moons from now, you will be a father. Elbereth gasped at the news. She is with child. Gods, this is wonderful. Elbereth hugged and kissed Lysa. Come, we must celebrate and give thanks to the maiden and to the mother, Elbereth said excitedly as she stood up with him. As they left the solar, they saw cousin Denise. Cousin, Elbereth greeted. Elbereth. Have you heard the news? Asked Denise, his face overwhelmed with delight and excitement. Of your future home? Yes indeed, Uncle John told me of it only 5 minutes ago, Elbereth replied. My congratulations, Lord Denise, Lysa said with a smile. My thanks, Lady Lysa, he replied. I spoke with Lord Arryn. And we have now agreed on a new name for my home. And what is that? Asked Lysa. Swordsong Castle, he said proudly. A fine name to call home, said Elbereth with a nod. Yes, I just need to think of what to have for my sigil, he said excitedly. Baelor 11. The Red Keep, Baelor thought as he rode through the entrance gates. Though one could never deny the magnificence and the beauty of the Red Keep, it could never be to Baelor's own liking. For the Red Keep was not as grand or as spectacular as the high tower of Old Town. And unlike the capital of the realm, the city which Baelor was proud to call home was a pleasant and wonderful place to live. King's Landing, though larger, more populated and spread out across more land, was poorly managed and ruled. For there existed no fresh water supply barring fountains, which were rare across the city. Nor was there a sewage system or a bathhouse. This had left a foul and unpleasant stench in the air. This had been the second time Baelor had come to King's Landing. The first had been to the coronation of Rhaegar as king and Elia as queen. She had kindly invited him to come years before. For their wedding. But Baelor was heartbroken at the news of their forthcoming marriage. He had spent over a week drowning his sorrows at nearly every tavern in Old Town, after sending a reply to Elia, feigning illness. And no matter how much time had passed between then and Harrenhal, Baelor's feelings for Elia had never changed. For still, she was forever in his mind and his heart. Baelor shook his head as he reminded himself of why he was here. For only a moon ago, a raven had come to Old Town, informing them of a new position on the small council, the Master of Farms. a position which had been extended as an offer to Bela. And he had accepted it without hesitation. Calm yourself. You cannot think of her. And nothing but her. When you had come to serve on the small council, Bela saw a middle-aged man awaiting in the courtyard. He wore finely made clothes, suited to a man of the minor nobility, and stood with two household soldiers of House Connington, for they both wore cloaks decorated with the twin roaring griffins of House Connington of Griffin's Roost. Sir Bela. Welcome to the Red Keep, my lord. I am Kylas Thurson, steward to my lord Connington, hand of the king. I am to escort you to your quarters here, he said. Bela smiled as he climbed down from Bright Wind, alongside his men whom had accompanied him from Old Town. Please do, said Bela with a smile. Bela followed John Connington's steward to his quarters in the Red Keep. As the local servants and his own unloaded his belongings into his chambers, Bela spoke with Kylas once again. There shall be a session of the small council, my lord, in 2 hours' time. I will show you where they are now. And I have already seen to it that servants in my employ will bring you the necessary documentation to begin your work. Excellent. My thanks, Master Thurson, Bela replied with a smile. He showed him the way to the small council. Bela thanked Thurson once more before he returned to his quarters and began to read the documents and paperwork which was brought to him by servants in Connington's household. It is a good position to form on the small council. An important one. For all the people of the realm, from the lowest born small folk to the most wealthy nobility, deserve to be fed as is deserving of them. None in Old Town will ever starve, thanks to all that my ancestors have done to provide for those whom call Old Town and the lands of House Hightower home. Bela decided to be early on his way to the small council. For he had grown up believing in making the best of first impressions. And so, he walked to the chambers of the small council, carrying a notebook in which he had written his notes from his documents into. On his arrival, he saw that there were already two there. He instantly recognized Great Uncle Drold. And the other was a shorter man than he, with sun-kissed skin and a balding head. And on his head, the few remaining hairs were silver gold. Valyrian coloring, just like his eyes, Bela had deducted. Lucerys Valerian. The master of ships, Bela realized. Nephew greeted Great Uncle Drold with a smile. Hello, Uncle Drold, said Bela before the two shook hands. Sir Bela, welcome to King's Landing. I am Lord Lucerys of House Valerian, said the master of ships. Thank you, Lord Valerian, said Bela before he shook hand with him. Finishing the greetings, Uncle Drold pointed at an empty chair. This is your place, Bela. Bela set his notes and his book down in front of his seat, which was positioned between Uncle Drold and another seat. But before he could ask whom was sat there, the doors opened. And he saw Roriger followed by two Kingsguard he didn't recognize, as well as John Connington, Miles Mouton, Richard Lunmouth, Grand Maester Pycelle and Varys the Spider. But the last two to enter were two women. The first, he recognized as Queen Mother Rolla. Still as glamorous and as beautiful as he remembered. Even after the strain of 3 successful births and 5 unsuccessful births. And the second made Bela's heart quicken just by looking at her. For she was the woman of his dreams. And yet, the woman he could not have, for she was wed to the king. Elia. My beautiful and perfect Elia. Elia 15. Elia was glad to see Bela. She felt comfortable to have another friend in King's Landing. For ever since she had come to King's Landing and wedded Roriger, she had been subjected to cruel gossip and slander from those jealous that she was wed to Roriger and not other ladies or their fathers. Foul serpent. Desert whore. Cruel seductress. Martell harlot. All of these and more, had been used to describe Elia. From her first visit to King's Landing. To their first days as a wedded husband and wife. And to their last days as Crown Prince and Princess of Dragonstone. It was only when they were crowned king and queen that the gossiping had ceased. At least, within her earshot and the hearing of her ladies-in-waiting. Elia was certain that many of those Northern nobility and courtiers in the Red Keep, especially those that smiled the most at her, all spoke the same gossip since she first wedded Roriger. Not that Roriger was ever of a mind to provide comfort for her. In the first 2 years of their marriage, he was kind and considerate, sometimes loving, and he would always provide comfort for her when he had the chance, when he saw her upset from the gossip she had overheard and what Ash, Lara and Miria had told her. But everything had changed when Roriger had uncovered his prophecies. And slowly, he became obsessed with them. To the point that Elia no longer recognized him. Nor understood him. But seeing Baylor in the small council, the first holder of the position of Master of Farms, provided Elia with a sense of happiness. She felt that she had only a few confidants and people whom she could trust and count as friends. And she was certain that Baylor would never ever try to be otherwise. Soon after the small council session, Elia returned to her favorite place in the Red Keep. The nursery. Where she found Egon, Visnir and Daenerys cooing as they played with Maya and Sabitha. Elia beamed as she saw the two playing and smiling at them.